Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the fanfiction guy. Back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku Had Dragon Incarcio Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. I woke up from my nap and looked at the ceiling of my dorm room. Sitting up in bed, I rubbed my eyes, stood up, and stretched. I grabbed a shirt from my closet and pulled it over my bare chest. As I sleepily walked down the hall, I approached the common room and heard something that bothered me. I paused to listen. Bakugo expressed his disdain for Midoriya, claiming the nerd always thought he was better than everyone else. Uraraka agreed, and I heard murmurs of agreement from many of my classmates. Kaminari added that Midoriya was annoying, always crying and whining. Todoroki attempted to lighten the mood with a laugh, while Yaoyorozu echoed Bakugo's sentiments, and the group nodded in agreement. Feeling a surge of frustration, I stepped into the common room, trying to remain as quiet as possible. I stared at the group as they continued their conversation. Some looked uncomfortable, but none defended me. Bakugo laughed, suggesting that Midoriya was faking his abilities. Quietly, I spoke up, letting them know I was not faking. Uraraka approached me, but I raised a hand to stop her. I had heard everything and was hurt by their words. Bakugo reacted with anger, demanding to know what I had said. I glared at him, feeling the heat of tears welling in my eyes. Iida, trying to maintain order, reprimanded me for my language, but I couldn't hold back. I pointed out his hypocrisy, noting that he had remained silent while others insulted me. Kaminari asked if I was okay, but I retorted that I apparently was not, since I was always crying. I confronted the group, expressing my frustration and anger. I shouted about how they had been given immense power from birth while I had to struggle without a quirk. My emotions boiled over, and I shouted that they were all fools for thinking I was pretending to be a hero. Uraraka snapped back, admitting that they all hated me for being too confident and trying to be perfect. Most of the group agreed, except for a few who remained silent. In a moment of rage, I shouted that they had all been given power effortlessly, while I had to fight for my place. Bakugo lunged at me, and in a moment of instinct, I activated my quirk, grabbing him and slamming him against the wall. I unleashed a flurry of punches, my anger driving me as I struck him repeatedly. Even when my quirk faded, I continued, until Kirishima and Sato pulled me away from Bakugo. I shouted at Bakugo, expressing my anger and frustration. Recovery Girl rushed to help Bakugo, and Iida assisted her as they left. Aizawa confronted me, demanding to know the meaning of my actions. I pointed to the group, insisting they knew what had happened. Todoroki began to suggest that I might need help, but Tokoyami interjected, stating the truth about what had happened. He explained that I had defended myself against Bakugo's attack, even if my response had been excessive. Aizawa questioned the group, shocked by their admission of hatred toward me. Tsuyu confirmed their feelings, and Aizawa was incredulous that they could hate someone who had saved them multiple times. I interrupted, asking Aizawa to leave them alone as Kirishima and Sato released me. I looked at my hands, bruised and bloodied, and declared my intention to leave for the summer. I challenged them all to a fight upon my return, exempting only a few of my friends. I returned to my room to pack, carefully placing my clothes into a suitcase while trying to avoid staining them with blood. I filled a backpack with my books, phone, chargers, and headphones. After putting on socks and my red high tops, I grabbed a dark green hoodie. Realizing I needed to treat my wounds, I gathered some antibiotic ointment, band-aids, and athletic tape. I cleaned my hands and examined the cuts, wrapping my wrists carefully. Just then, Kirishima knocked on my door, asking if we could talk. I sighed and opened the door, receiving a tight hug from him. He apologized for not standing up for me earlier, explaining that they had been scared or thought it was all a joke. I chuckled softly, telling him there was no need to apologize. I understand. But you stood up for me when it mattered, and I appreciate that, especially you, Tokoyami. The raven-headed teenager simply nodded in acknowledgement. You are the most powerful and heroic person in this class. It's unfortunate that others fail to recognize it, Tokoyami remarked, and I nodded in gratitude. I know you. You're not arrogant, nor are you the person they claim you to be. You're a good person and an even better hero, Sato added, and I nodded again in thanks. I think you're just amazing, Kodo whispered quietly. Thank you, everyone. Before I leave, I want to offer some advice. Kirishima, focus on building your endurance with Unbreakable. Tokoyami, find a way to utilize Dark Shadow as effectively as possible. Sato, choose a suite that won't make you act foolishly. Koda, be more confident. A more self-assured version of you would be incredibly powerful. I gestured to each of them in turn. We'll hold down the fort while you're gone. We'll make sure no one destroys your room or anything, Kirishima assured me, and I nodded in appreciation. I grabbed my suitcase and backpack and walked down the hall into the main area. Iida had returned and was speaking to the others. Bakugo will need to go to the hospital for potential brain damage. Recovery Girl healed his external injuries, but he's still in bad shape, Iida informed, and I couldn't help but smirk slightly. Get back here, you bastard! Uraraka shouted, spotting me. You're one to talk, I replied calmly as she approached, clearly upset. You put Bakugo in the hospital. Do you have anything to say for yourself? She yelled, and I simply stared at her. You love him, don't you? I asked, and she flushed. That's not important. She snapped, and I chuckled. I see I'm correct. And to answer your earlier question, I say good riddance, I said, turning toward the door once more. You leave, you're a coward. Iida shouted at me, and I let out a bitter laugh. I'm not. I'm being smart. If I stay here, you all will beat me up. Give Bakugo my regards, I retorted, walking out of the dorm. I made my way to the train station and boarded the train heading home, trying to hold back my tears. I managed to keep it together until I opened the door to my house. I collapsed in the doorway, sobbing uncontrollably. Izuku? Izuku, what happened? My mom asked, kneeling beside me. I just cried, allowing my emotions to pour out. Most of Class 1A hates me. They really hate me, Mom, I managed to say between sobs. What? I need to call the school, my mom began, her voice filled with anger. I don't want to drag you into this too. I want to go to Grandpa's. I need some time away from Japan. Please, Mom? I pleaded, and she looked at me before smiling sadly. Of course. Your grandfather would be happy to see you, she replied, and I nodded. Thank you. Thank you so much. Welcome to Houston. Please exit the plane in an orderly manner. Thank you for flying with us. That was all that registered before I put my headphones on. I started listening to Floor Seats by Moxes as I walked off the 747 and into George Bush International Airport. It had been a week since the incident at the dorms. Almost everyone had tried texting me, but I didn't respond. I was too frustrated. As I made my way through the terminal, a voice with a light Texas accent called out to me. It was my grandfather, a well-built man in his early 60s with graying hair and brown eyes. Grandpa! I exclaimed, walking up to him and giving him a tight hug. He still smelled strongly of cologne and fresh air. It's been a while since I've seen you. You've grown quite a bit, son, he said, ruffling my green hair. Just a bit. You've only gotten more gray in your hair, old man, I replied with a smirk, and he let out his iconic hearty laugh. Still got your sense of humor, I see, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. You still have your laugh and lack of restraint, I replied, and he chuckled. Your mother explained to me why you're here. Trying to get away, huh? He asked, and I nodded. I just need some time to myself. Your ranch seems like a good place for that, I said, and he nodded solemnly. I've got a few spots where no one really goes. You'll have plenty of time and space to think, train, and do what you need to do. Let's go, he said, and I laughed at his enthusiasm. Let's, I agreed, and we walked out of the terminal into the hot Texas afternoon. We hopped in his truck and drove an hour and a half to his ranch, a sprawling 300-acre open field filled with cows, horses, and a small group of chickens. I've expanded a bit since you were last here. I added another 50 acres on the southern end of the ranch, and about 15 acres have been left open for practice, Grandpa explained, and I nodded. That'll work. Thank you, I said as he pulled up to the massive ranch house. I unloaded my bag and looked at the house, seemingly unchanged in the 2 years since my last visit. You can stay in the guest house. It's the smaller building connected to the main one, he said, and I nodded. I'm going to shower. When's dinner? I asked, and he laughed. Always thinking about your stomach, huh? He teased, and I chuckled a bit. Kinda. I'm hoping to bulk up. I want to get bigger, I said, and the old man nodded. I can help. I was a bit of a bodybuilder back in the day. I have some plans that should work pretty well. Talk to me in the morning, he said, and I nodded. I'll be over in a few minutes, I replied, walking into the guest house. It was fairly large, about the size of an apartment back in Tokyo actually. It was bigger. It had a full kitchen with a stocked fridge, 2 bathrooms, and 2 bedrooms. The master had an attached bathroom, which was certainly nice. After setting my suitcase aside, I grabbed a pair of athletic shorts and a gray t-shirt, then hopped into the shower, letting the hot water pour over my back and soak my hair. I needed to cut it at some point. After drying off, I got dressed. As I walked into the main house, a familiar smell hit me. Brisket. Ah, so you've caught a whiff of it. My world-famous brisket. Grandpa said, gesturing to the large slab of meat in front of him. I wouldn't say world-famous, but it certainly smells good, I replied, sitting down across the island from him as he began to cut the meat. I made this for us and our guests, he said, and I looked at him, a bit confused. Guests? I asked, and the old man nodded. Yeah. Just an old friend and some of his children and grandchildren. I think there are 10 of them coming, so I had to make this massive slab of meat to serve them all. They're bringing the sides and dessert, he explained just as the doorbell rang. That's them, I take it? I asked as he began to wash his hands. Yeah. Can you cut the meat? He asked, and I nodded. Grabbing the knife from where he left it, I began to slice the meat quickly and efficiently. I heard greetings and welcomes as the voices drew closer. And this is my grandson, Izuku Midoriya, Grandpa announced, walking into the kitchen with a man about his age, dressed in dark jeans and a gray dress shirt. He had a similar build and even shared my grandfather's graying hair. I've heard quite a bit about you, young man. Michael Andrews. Nice to meet you, the man said, extending his hand. Nice to meet you too, I replied, returning the handshake. His grip was firm yet somehow gentle. I hear you're training to become a hero in Japan, he said, and I nodded. Yes, sir. I just finished my first year at UA High, I said, and the old man smiled widely, revealing bright white teeth. You know, I was once a hero myself. The speed hero, Black Lightning. Mr. Andrews declared, black lightning flickering around him. I've heard stories about you. You were the #1 hero here in the US at one point, I acknowledged, and Mr. Andrews laughed, a deep, hearty sound. A bit of a fanboy, huh? I like it. You have a good grandson, Ian. Mr. Andrews said, referring to my grandfather by his Americanized first name. His Japanese name was Isao, and how he chose Ian was beyond me. I do indeed, he replied, and I nodded. And I'm stuck with this graying old man with no volume control, I teased, and Mr. Andrews roared with laughter at that statement. I like you even more now, kid. Come, let me introduce you to my family, he laughed, gesturing to the other 9 people standing in the dining room, chatting. This is my wonderful wife of 35 years, Isabella. Mr. Andrews said, putting his arm around a woman dressed in a knee-length blue dress. Her red hair was still vibrant, and her eyes were sharp. Nice to meet you, young man, she said, extending her hand. Izuku Midoriya, Mrs. Andrews, I replied, shaking her hand firmly. The old man introduced his family, pointing to a group that included his eldest son, John, his wife, Maria, and their 2 children, Jack and Julia. John was a well-built man in his early 40s with dark brown hair, while Maria had light blonde hair. Their kids shared hazel eyes and dirty blonde hair. John acknowledged the young man with enthusiasm, recognizing him as the grandson of Mr. Midoriya. The young man raised an eyebrow at the remark, surprised by the title. He playfully exclaimed that he didn't know he was infamous, to which John shrugged sheepishly, explaining that the title was not his doing. The young man chuckled in response, greeting John warmly and shaking Maria's hand. He nodded at the twins, who returned the gesture. The old man then introduced his lovely daughter, Madeline, and her husband, Zachary Bolin, along with their twins, Kirsten and Kydra. He clarified that Madeline was his adopted daughter, but still considered family. This family appeared younger than the previous one, though their children seemed a bit older. Kirsten resembled her mother closely, except for her father's striking blue eyes. Zachary was tall and slender, with dark blonde hair and brown eyes. Their children had strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes. Mrs. Bolin greeted the young man enthusiastically, expressing her belief that he would become a hero someday. He smiled modestly in response, acknowledging her words. After shaking Zachary's hand, he nodded at the twins again, who mirrored his gesture. With excitement, the old man announced that the brisket was ready, prompting the group to head off to grab food. This takes place at the very end of Izuku's first year. No major manga spoilers, only some of his quirks that he got. After everyone got food, the kids strayed outside to sit down and eat while the adults stayed inside. Izuku grabbed 3 large slices of brisket, some coleslaw, salad, and a Coke Zero. One of the twins, Kydra, asked Izuku how old he was. He replied that he was 16 and inquired about their ages. The twins exchanged surprised glances at his straightforwardness. Kydra shared that they were both 16, while Jack was 15 and Julia was. Izuku then asked which of the twins was older, and Kirsten pointed to herself, stating that she was born 5 minutes before Kydra. Kydra muttered about her sister's confidence in being older, shaking her head. Jack then asked Izuku about his training to become a hero and what his quirk was. Izuku explained that he had multiple quirks, starting with superpower, which allowed him to produce massive amounts of energy for movement or striking. He mentioned his second quirk, Black Whip, and decided it would be easier to demonstrate. He summoned black tendrils from his forearms and grabbed a rock near the porch where they were sitting. He continued with his final quirk, Float, which he described as self-explanatory. The twins nodded in understanding. Kirsten expressed that their quirks seemed dull in comparison, revealing that she could create fast winds while Kydra could summon lightning at will. Izuku was taken aback, acknowledging that those abilities were impressive. He then turned to Jack and Julia, asking about their quirks. Julia shared that she could run really fast, like their grandfather, while Jack could solve equations quickly, showcasing his intelligence. Izuku proposed that they train together, explaining that it was part of the reason he came there in the first place. Kydra asked if he really wanted to train with them, and he confirmed his interest. He mentioned needing training partners and noted that they all seemed eager to enter a hero course. The kids nodded in agreement. Jack pointed out that Izuku had already received training, so they might not be able to help him. Julia nodded in agreement as well. Izuku insisted that they would be helpful, emphasizing that their quirks were powerful if trained correctly. He encouraged them, stating that super speed, intelligence, lightning control, and wind control were all impressive abilities. Kydra asked if he could train them, and he confirmed that he could. In return, he suggested they help him learn to control his quirks further. The kids nodded in agreement, sealing their deal. Over the next 2 months, everyone trained vigorously, growing stronger, and in my case, quite a bit bigger. I grew about 5 inches and gained nearly 20 pounds of muscle. My metabolism and growth rate seemed to have skyrocketed for some reason. I also cut my hair short on the sides while leaving the top long. Kydra and Kirsten improved the power of their quirks, with Kirsten able to create tornado force winds and Kydra summoning lightning strikes powerful enough to create physical craters. Jack enhanced his ability to process information, solving difficult problems at a greater speed. Julia became faster and could even keep up with me at full cowl 20%. Then one day, I awakened another quirk. While sparring with Julia at high speeds, I raised my arms to block a high kick and was suddenly transported to a realm where the incarnations of previous one for all users appeared. I felt more of my body present, having most of my torso and a bit of my legs. A voice behind me remarked on my newfound power. It was a male figure shrouded in darkness, likely the second or third user. He acknowledged my strength and explained that he would grant me his quirk, named Incarcio. This quirk would transform my skin into scales as hard as steel and sprout wings. He cautioned me to use it sparingly, as it consumed a lot of stamina, but based on my current form, I could use it for about 5 minutes. With that, I snapped back to reality. True to his word, silvery scales appeared over my body, and I sprouted gray, dragon-like wings from my back. Realizing that if Julia hit me at this speed, she could cause serious injury, I leaped into the air, flapping my wings as if it were second nature. This was incredible. I marveled at my exposed arms, covered in silver, lizard-like scales. I couldn't see my face, but judging by the reactions of my friends when I landed, it must have been something special. I deactivated my new quirk and looked at their shocked faces. Jack asked how I had transformed into a dragon, and I realized I hadn't properly explained my quirk. I went on to explain one for all, how it worked, and how I could unlock new quirks at times. The group sat in stunned silence, processing what I had just shared. Kydra asked if I had been quirkless before receiving a quirk, and I nodded. She then inquired who had given me this quirk, and I stiffened slightly, mentioning my mentor without going into further detail. Jack suddenly stated that it must have been All Might. Julia expressed her confusion, and Jack explained that All Might had lost his quirk fighting someone called All for One. He pointed out that All Might had said, "It's your turn," after that battle, referring to me. I acknowledged Jack's intelligence, and he shrugged, accepting the compliment. Kydra asked if I was All Might's successor, and I nodded, admitting that in theory, I was the next symbol of peace, though I still had a long way to go as I inspected the scars on my arms. Jack reassured me that they would help while they could and even suggested visiting me in Japan someday. I thanked them, rolling out my shoulders, and proposed we get back to training. My friends grinned widely as they placed their hands on top of mine, and we shouted our rallying cry together, the sound echoing across the Texas plains. As I prepared to leave, Jack asked if I really had to go. Julia wrapped me in a tight hug, nearly squeezing the air out of me. I explained that, legally, I had to follow the rules. Julia let go, tears in her eyes, which now stained my hoodie. Kydra cautioned me against returning, pointing out that most of my classmates were not the best people. I laughed, acknowledging her point but explaining that I had made a promise to confront them. UA was the best hero academy in Japan, and I didn't want to give that up. I loaded my suitcase and backpack into my grandfather's truck. Kirsten asked me to visit, and I assured her I would be back next summer without a doubt. Jack expressed that he would miss me, as I had been a good reality check for many of the issues we faced. We shared a bro hug, smiling at each other. Kydra then stood on her tiptoes and lightly kissed me on the cheek before pulling me into a tight hug, asking me to visit. I promised I would. Kirsten pulled me into a loose hug, jokingly saying she wouldn't kiss me, which earned her a sarcastic reply from me. I told them I would come to visit next summer unless they came to me first. They all smiled, and Julia mentioned that if they could convince their parents, they might visit. My grandfather called for me to get going, and I nodded in agreement. As I hopped into the truck, I waved out the window at my friends, feeling a mix of emotions as we pulled away from the ranch. Flight 246 to Tokyo, boarding will begin in 5 minutes, announced the flight attendant over the intercom. With a sigh, Izuku stood up and cracked his neck. He opened his bag to retrieve his ticket and, in the process, discovered a letter tucked inside. As he unfolded the letter, he found 3 items within: a heartfelt note, $300 bills, and a set of Yamaha keys. Reading the letter brought tears to his eyes. Dear Izuku, I know you haven't had the easiest life, with your dad leaving and being quirkless for so long. That being said, seeing you now, I realize how much you've changed. You've grown into a good man. This is a gift from me to you, as an acknowledgement of who you've become. I hope you like it. Check parking spot 451 when you land. Have fun, Grandpa. A smile spread across Izuku's face as he folded the letter and placed the keys into his backpack. This was going to be an exciting adventure. He quickly texted Kirishima, asking him to bring his father's truck to the airport upon his arrival. Kirishima responded almost immediately, confirming he would be there. Flight 246 to Tokyo is now boarding. All priority passengers, please head to the boarding lines, the flight attendant announced again. Izuku walked toward the lines, anticipation bubbling within him as he prepared to return home. I walked off the plane in Tokyo and entered the terminal, taking in my surroundings. As I made my way toward the exit, I spotted a familiar spike of red hair. Kirishima noticed me and exclaimed with excitement, recognizing me instantly. We embraced in a friendly hug, holding it for a few seconds before stepping back. "It's me, Kirishima," I chuckled as he looked me over. He had grown a bit as well and had a new scar above his left eye, which I made a mental note to ask about later. "You got a lot bigger, Midori bro," Kirishima remarked, and I nodded in agreement. "I did. I also got a new quirk," I replied, watching as his eyes widened in surprise. "Another one? What is it?" he asked, and I smirked slightly. "It's probably better if we go outside to show you," I suggested, and we headed out to the parking lot outside the main terminal. I activated my quirk, Incarcio, and Kirishima's jaw dropped in astonishment. "Are you a dragon now?" he asked, and I laughed. "Kinda. This makes me quite a bit like Tetsu, I think. I'm as strong as steel and can fly. I don't know what else I can do since I've only had this for about a month or so, but it's pretty amazing," I explained, and Kirishima nodded in agreement. I deactivated Incarcio and pulled out the keys my grandfather had given me. "To find my gift," I said, scanning the area. I was in the 440s by the looks of it. I walked down to the 450s and found my present. It was a sleek, green and black 2020 Yamaha YZF R1M, a super sport motorcycle that was certainly not cheap. "Holy cow," I muttered as I sat on the motorcycle. "Thanks, old man. This is incredible." It didn't have a helmet, but I could figure that out later. "Dude, that is awesome. What are you going to do with it?" Kirishima asked, admiring the motorcycle. "Keep it, obviously. You brought the truck I asked for, right?" I inquired, and he nodded. "You want me to bring it around?" he offered, and I nodded in response. "Give me about 10 minutes or so," he said before jogging away. True to his word, he returned about 10 minutes later with a truck. We loaded the motorcycle into the truck bed and secured it, tossing my suitcase and backpack into the back seats before Kirishima pulled away from the curb. "Do you even know how to drive that thing?" Kirishima asked, and I nodded. "I know how, but I need to get certified. I'll take a test in a few days for a heavy engine license. It's nearly 1,000 cubic centimeters, according to the site." "This is kind of insane," I explained, glancing at an article on my phone. 1,000 cubic centimeters? You sure you can handle all that?" he asked, and I nodded confidently. "I've driven what was supposed to be an 800 cubic centimeters engine before, and that one was modified to run at about. I handled it pretty well. This bike is less powerful, but it's a bit smaller. Estimated top speed is 186 miles per hour, or 292 kilometers per hour, I detailed, and Kirishima whistled in awe. "That's incredibly fast. You're going to need a helmet and a riding jacket, huh?" he said, and I nodded. "I'll go get them tomorrow. Then I'm going to get my license," I replied, thinking about how my mom would react. "Good luck with that, man. School starts in a week. Are you ready?" Kirishima asked, and I nodded. "Ready as I'll ever be, I guess." "You?" I inquired, and Kirishima chuckled. "I don't know. I'm ready for the hero course, but the rest of the class has pretty much ostracized the rest of us. Even Mina," Kirishima said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper. "You like her, huh?" I asked, and he nodded solemnly. "Mina and I still talk, but it's tense the whole time. The rest of the class avoids the subject of you," he explained, and I remembered something. "How's Bakugo?" "I still need to settle things with him," I said, and Kirishima laughed. "He's out of the hospital. Has been for about 6 weeks. You really did a number on him. Gave him a concussion, broke his nose and jaw, and knocked out several teeth. He's pretty upset about it. He's been ranting non-stop since he left the hospital, talking about getting back at you when you return," Kirishima explained, and I chuckled at the thought. "Means he's ready for a rematch," I said as Kirishima pulled in front of my house. "How did you know where my house was?" I asked, getting out of the truck and walking around to the bed. "Bakugo's mom called me to ask what happened to him. After I explained, she told me to talk to your mom and gave me her address." "Where do you want to put the bike?" he asked as we unloaded it. "Just on the side of the street. Thanks for driving me, man. I'll be back at the dorms when school starts," I said, and Kirishima nodded. I'll tell the rest of the non-haters. You want me to inform Aizawa as well? He asked, and I nodded as I grabbed my backpack and suitcase. That would be helpful, I replied, and Kirishima nodded. See you later, Midori bro, he called as he drove away in his truck. I walked up to my apartment and opened the door, only to be met by a warm embrace. You're back, Izuku. I missed you so much, my mom exclaimed, nearly squeezing the breath out of me with her tight hug. I missed you too, Mom. Now, can you please let go? I'm going to suffocate here, I said, and she instantly released me. You've grown so much, Izuku, she said, sniffling. I have but right now, I need some sleep. I'm dead tired, I replied, and my mom nodded. We can talk more in the morning, she said, and I smiled before pulling her into a tight hug. I'm glad to be back, Mom, I said, and she smiled back at me. I know, Izuku, she replied, and I returned her smile. As the protagonists sat at a red light, anticipation built within them. It had been 4 days since they received their license, and the day before returning to UA was finally here. After spending hours riding and getting accustomed to the bike's handling and speed, they felt confident. The helmet fit snugly, and the jacket provided warmth against the chilly air. Dressed in dark jeans, they were ready for whatever lay ahead. Suddenly, a loud, anguished roar pierced the air, drawing their attention. A massive boar-like creature charged past, pursued by heroes. An unfamiliar voice shouted commands, and a brown and white blur zipped by. The blur revealed itself to be a muscular woman, perhaps a few years older, with long white hair, bunny ears, and a fluffy tail. Clad in a white leotard with a fluffy collar and shin-high boots, she was an impressive sight. Curiosity piqued, the protagonist prepared to assist. They parked the bike, removed their jacket and helmet, and activated full cowl at 30%. Leaping toward the rampaging beast, they caught sight of the woman again. She inquired about their identity, and they explained their status as a UA student with a provisional license, asking about the situation. The woman informed them that the villains had robbed a bank and were fleeing. Nodding in understanding, the protagonist leaped forward with incredible speed, landing 300 yards ahead of the giant boar. With a powerful jump, they aimed to axe-kick the creature's snout, shouting their move as they descended. The impact was significant, sending the boar crashing into the street and halting its rampage. The leader of the villains shouted orders, and several of them drew weapons while others activated their quirks. Undeterred, the protagonist prepared for the next confrontation, drawing out Incarcio and leaping toward the attackers. With a fierce roundhouse kick, they unleashed a powerful wave of wind that sent several villains flying back. As more approached, one spewed flames from his hands. The protagonist charged through the flames, delivering a front kick that sent the villain crashing into the unconscious boar. Suddenly, a slug from a shotgun struck the protagonist in the chest, sending them sprawling. They quickly rose, feeling the impact but relieved to find no blood. The villain with the shotgun expressed disbelief at their resilience, prompting a sharp retort from the protagonist before they leaped forward, delivering a roundhouse kick that sent the villain crashing into a nearby building. As more villains approached, one capable of spitting acid and another controlling water, the protagonist decided to tackle the water manipulator first. Using Black Whip, they ensnared the villain and slammed him into the ground, temporarily incapacitating him. Turning to face the acid spitter, the protagonist dodged an attack but was caught off guard by a second glob of acid that landed on their arm, causing immediate pain. Determined to end the fight, they charged at the acid spitter, delivering a swift elbow strike to his throat, followed by a precise karate chop that knocked him out. Just then, the leader of the villains attempted to intervene but was swiftly dealt with by the bunny woman, who landed beside the protagonist. Concerned, she examined the protagonist's arm, which bore a significant wound from the acid. Despite the pain, the protagonist maintained a light-hearted demeanor, acknowledging the severity of the injury while expressing gratitude for their quirk's protection. The woman insisted on seeking medical help, but the protagonist was determined to retrieve their motorcycle first. As she offered to fetch the bike, the protagonist provided her with its location, reminding her of their helmet and jacket. Just then, someone tossed a water bottle their way, and they gratefully accepted it, drinking deeply to ease their thirst. In the following minutes, several bystanders came to assist, cleaning the wound and applying antibiotic ointment before wrapping it in gauze. When the bunny woman returned with the motorcycle, wearing the helmet and jacket, the protagonist felt a slight sense of relief. An ambulance soon arrived, and a paramedic approached to assess the situation. The protagonist, though in pain, reassured the medic that they were alive and relatively okay. After examining the wound, the medic confirmed that there was no major muscle damage but recommended an MRI for further evaluation. The protagonist, confident in their pain tolerance, declined additional pain relief as the medic rewrapped the wound, ready to face whatever came next. The rabbit lady inquired about the motorcycle as Izuku stood up and made his way toward the ambulance. He replied that she should just bring it to the hospital, mentioning that he could drive home. She nodded in understanding and then asked for his name. Izuku introduced himself as Izuku Midoriya, extending his good hand. She responded with her name, Roomie Usajiyama, but encouraged him to call her Mirko, offering a charming smile. He felt a slight warmth on his cheeks but managed to maintain his composure. Curious, he asked if she was a rookie hero, to which she blushed slightly. Mirko explained that she had been working for about 6 months, and that this was her first significant mission. She expressed her gratitude, saying she owed him one. Izuku modestly replied that he had merely assisted, emphasizing that she had taken out the leader and that it was her victory. With that, he climbed into the ambulance, and they drove away. At the hospital, the doctor informed him that there was no major damage, thanks to his quirk and the quick thinking of bystanders. He would be sore for a few days and would have a scar, but overall, he would be fine. He nodded in acknowledgement. He asked whether he should keep his arm wrapped, and the doctor confirmed that it was necessary to prevent infection. The doctor also reminded him of his long-term ligament injuries, to which he nodded, having heard it many times before. The doctor assured him that they would provide antibiotics for potential infection, along with gauze and medical tape, and instructed him to wait in the lobby. As he stepped into the lobby, he spotted Mirko holding his helmet and jacket. She inquired about his arm while handing them over. He slung the jacket over his shoulder, leaving his arms out of the sleeves, and held the helmet in his good hand. He mentioned that he would probably have a scar but reassured her that he would be all right, showing her the scars on his uninjured arm. Mirko was surprised by the number of scars he had, examining them closely without noticing his slight blush. He admitted he had more than he cared to count. Just then, a hospital worker called his name, and he raised his good hand in response. The woman handed him a paper bag containing bandages, gauze, and antibiotic cream, and he thanked her before returning to Mirko. He mentioned that this was likely goodbye, and she nodded, expressing her hope to see him around. He smiled back, feeling a warmth in her presence as she walked out the doors and leaped away, leaving him to think about her rabbit-like agility. He walked over to his motorcycle, donned his helmet and jacket, and rode through the dark streets of Tokyo on his way home. Once he arrived, he removed his helmet and walked inside, only to find his mother crying on the couch. When she noticed him, she shouted his name and pulled him into a tight hug, causing him to wince in pain as she pressed his wounded arm against her. He gently reminded her about his arm, and she gasped in realization, immediately apologizing. He reassured her that it was fine and that she hadn't done anything wrong. However, she expressed her concern about his reckless behavior, worried about the serious injuries he had sustained. He smiled sheepishly, explaining that he couldn't just stand by and do nothing, as he was a hero in training. His mother shook her head, still worried about his safety. She admitted that it scared her to see him get hurt like this. He acknowledged her fears, admitting that it scared him too, but he couldn't bear the thought of not acting when he had the chance to help. She nodded, understanding, and urged him to be more careful before telling him to get some rest. He agreed and headed to his room, where he changed into pajamas and took a shower before getting into bed. However, sleep eluded him, and he found himself researching Mirko on his computer. He discovered that she was a new hero, known for her impressive close-quarters fighting skills, primarily using kicks. Her quirk, Rabbit, granted her physical properties akin to that of a rabbit. He noted that she was quite young, only 18, just under 2 years older than him. Realizing it was nearly midnight, he decided to get some sleep, falling into a deep, dreamless slumber. The next morning he woke up early, around 6 a.m. After stretching, he put on his black running shoes and socks and went for a long run, covering nearly 10 kilometers. By the time he returned home, it was just past 7 a.m. He took a quick shower, dressed in his school uniform, rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, and pulled on his jacket. After a quick breakfast, he grabbed his backpack, which contained his computer and phone. Before heading out, he put on his red high tops, along with his riding jacket and helmet, and left for school. Starting the roaring engine of his motorcycle, he sped through the streets of Tokyo toward UA. Upon arriving, he parked outside the 2A dorms and hopped off the bike. He sent a text to Kirishima to find out where his dorm was located. Kirishima replied with the details, letting him know that his dorm was on the second floor, west side, center dorm, and that he would open the window for him. As he walked around to the west side of the building, curious students came out to see what the noise was about. True to his word, Kirishima opened the dorm window. Using full cowl at 5%, he leaped into the room, finding it set up just like his previous one. He noted that he would need to make some changes, particularly getting rid of some tacky posters. After removing his riding jacket and helmet and placing them on the desk, he checked his bandages to ensure they were secure. With class starting in about 30 minutes, he decided to be early. Grabbing his backpack, he leaped out the window and ran to class 2A, where he found Tokoyami already present. Tokoyami had changed as well, having grown taller and more muscular. He smirked at Tokoyami, holding his jacket over his shoulder with 2 fingers, and they shared a friendly embrace, both pleased to see each other again. Tokoyami remarked on the noticeable changes in him, and he smiled, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. A person can change a lot in 3 months. As I shrug, Tokoyami notices the wound on my arm and asks what happened. I reply that it's a long story, and he looks at me in disbelief before pulling out his phone to show me something. It's an interview with Mirko, likely recorded after the fight last night. The reporter asks about the rumors of her receiving help in taking down the gang that robbed the bank just hours ago. Mirko confirms the rumors, stating that a UA student named Izuku Midoriya assisted her and got injured in the process. She praises me as a tough kid and a true hero before moving on to the next question. Tokoyami pauses the video and looks at me, surprised. He comments that he didn't know that it happened, and I chuckle, realizing that my Neta might be out for revenge. A familiar voice interrupts, asking how many times I intend to injure myself in my hero escapades. It's Aizawa, the haggard hero. I chuckle and respond that this time, I didn't injure myself. Aizawa shakes his head in disbelief and tells me to sit down in my usual spot. I walk over to my desk, prop my feet up and pull out my headphones, starting my music as classmates trickle in, many giving me odd looks. Once everyone is inside, I'm listening to my song when Aizawa begins calling roll. I take off my headphones and put my feet down. After a few minutes, Aizawa calls my name, and Iida interjects that I'm not present. I laugh, and the class looks at me oddly. I announce that I am here, and the entire class's jaws drop, except for Kirishima and Tokoyami. Bakugo snarls that I can't possibly be Deku, but I assure him that I am, using my childhood nickname for him. Kirishima confirms my identity, and Tokoyami nods in agreement. Todoroki comments that I look like a different person, and I glare at him, retorting that he should be quiet. Iida stands up, exclaiming about my language, and I respond with a gesture that only makes him angrier. He insists I show more respect and put on my jacket and tie, claiming I'm disrespecting UA. I challenge him to make me, and he threatens to do just that. Aizawa intervenes, warning us to settle down and not make him use his quirk. I plead my case, explaining that Iida has an inferiority complex and that I have a valid reason for not wearing my jacket. Iida demands to know why, and I ask if he saw the interview with Mirko. He freezes and I chuckle, asking Tokoyami to play the clip for the class. As the video plays, the class falls silent at the sight of my injury. I unwrap my wound, revealing a significant acid burn on my forearm. I explain to Iida that this is why I'm not wearing my jacket and tell him to sit down. He sighs and complies, and I return to my seat, nodding at Aizawa as he finishes roll call. Aizawa then proposes a challenge for Class 2A, Anyone who dislikes me will face me in Gym Gamma, as per my earlier threat. Smiles spread across the faces of my challengers, while I smirk, anticipating the fun ahead. Bakugo shouts that he'll defeat me, and I remind him that overconfidence can be dangerous. I stand up and head toward the locker room to change into my UAP uniform, as my costume needs adjustments. Once ready, I jog over to Gym Gamma and perform some light stretches to warm up. By the time everyone else arrives, I'm filled with adrenaline. I announce that Kirishima, Tokoyami, Sato, and Koda are exempt from the fight, and they nod, moving to the sidelines. Aizawa asks if all fighters are ready, and everyone nods. He signals the start of the match, and I activate full cowl at 40%, leaping toward the center of the 15-person group. Flipping in midair, I execute a powerful axe kick in front of Bakugo, creating a shockwave and a crater that forces everyone to stumble. I unleash a Delaware smash, flicking my fingers at Iida, Todoroki, and Bakugo, sending them flying and temporarily removing them from the fight. Ojiro is the first to attack, leaping at me with a flying kick. I counter with a high kick to his gut, sending him crashing into Hagakure. Jiro tries to freeze me in place, but I break free with an Air Force smash, slamming her into Aoyama. I quickly get back on my feet and axe kick Jiro in the chest, knocking her and Aoyama out. Momo charges at me with a bow staff, but I disarm her, punching her in the face and taking her out. Tsuyu attempts to restrain me with her tongue, but I use Black Whip to grab Shoji and swing him into her, causing her to release me. I leap toward them, kicking Shoji in the temple and knocking him out, then karate chopping Tsuyu in the back of her neck. Shiro tries to pull me in with tape, but I use Black Whip again to grab my Netta, swinging him into Uraraka, causing them both to float. I yank the tape off my arm, throwing Shiro off balance. As I get close enough, I deliver a high kick, sending him flying. Uraraka and my Netta find themselves stuck together, which I find amusing. Finally, I face my last opponent among the 12, Mina, who warns me that I'm going to lose. She throws acid at me and I prepare for the next move. I activated Incarcio, and the acid dissolved my shirt, revealing the silvery scales covering my body. I leaped at her, then dropped low to sweep her feet out from under her. She hurled acid at me again, and I barely dodged it, grabbing her head and slamming it against the ground, rendering her unconscious. With a glance at Iida, Todoroki, and Bakugo, who had just gotten back on their feet, I muttered to myself about the progress I had made. Bakugo shouted in anger, using explosions to propel himself toward me. I responded with a snarl, challenging him as he spun in the air. He unleashed a powerful attack, creating a whirlwind of explosions. I countered with a roundhouse kick, sending him flying back with the force of the air pressure. Once I regained my stance, I leaped forward and struck Todoroki hard in the ribs, sending him crashing to the ground. He wasn't getting up. Iida charged at me, launching a kick aimed at my head. I blocked it with my arm, then seized his leg and threw him against the wall, cracking the concrete and incapacitating him. Bakugo, still furious, questioned how I had become so powerful. I absorbed his explosive attack, advancing toward him without flinching. When I was close enough, I lifted him by the throat, holding him several inches off the ground as he struggled to break free. I told him I had been powerful for a long time, he just hadn't acknowledged it. I tossed him aside, and Aizawa calmly declared that I had won, surveying the destruction around us. 3/4 of the class were injured and in need of recovery girls' assistance. Kirishima remarked on my intensity, and I smirked, acknowledging my awareness of it. As nurse bots arrived to retrieve the injured students, Sato expressed his admiration for my performance. I shrugged off the praise, stating that I had simply done what needed to be done. Koda, surprisingly more confident, commented on my victory, and I smiled at his growth. I encouraged him, acknowledging that his newfound confidence was well-deserved. We decided it was time to change and headed toward the exit of Gym Gamma. In the following weeks at school, the students in Class 1A who had previously disliked me mostly left me alone, aside from a few snide remarks. I learned about the social dynamics that had formed during my absence. Bakugo and Todoroki were seen as the top students, with their girlfriends, Uraraka and Yaoyorozu, asserting their influence by association. They ruled the class with an iron fist. However, a few students, like Ojiro and Mina, began to warm up to me. Mina recognized her past mistakes, while Ojiro respected my fighting abilities. The majority, though, remained against me. Kirishima expressed his relief that I had put the others in their place while we relaxed in the common room, watching TV before school. It was early morning, and we were tuned into a news report about Mirko, who had stopped another gang the previous night. I agreed with Kirishima, stating that it was necessary to take action. As I removed my tie, I reflected on how I had put it on out of habit. Kirishima noted that the news coverage of Mirko had increased since our encounter with the gang. I acknowledged that the attention was likely due to my injuries, but I was pleased that she was receiving recognition for her strength. Kirishima then commented on Mirko's appearance, and I couldn't help but agree. He asked about her height, and I considered it for a moment. Without her ears, she reached about my shoulder, but with them, she was nearly taller than me. Kirishima found this interesting, and we made our way to class. Most of the day was normal until the hero training session. Aizawa instructed everyone to head to Gym Gamma for advanced combat training over the next 2 weeks, with multiple pro heroes assisting. The class buzzed with excitement while Midoriya grabbed his costume and changed. He jogged over to Gym Gamma, where he found 3 pro heroes waiting: Snipe, All Might, and Midnight. All Might approached Midoriya, greeting him warmly, though he appeared in his skeletal form as usual. Midoriya asked if All Might would be training them that day, to which All Might confirmed he would be helping with technique and focusing on upper body hand-to-hand combat. Midoriya inquired about the lower body training, and All Might admitted he wasn't sure who would handle that, only that it would be a female instructor. Just then, the door burst open, and Bakugo stormed in, shoving past Midoriya. All Might explained that he and Aizawa would oversee upper body combat, while Snipe and Midnight would train those specializing in mid to long-range combat. Iida raised a question about who would train the students focusing on lower body combat, prompting Ojiro to ask the same. Suddenly, the doors flew off their hinges, and Midoriya reacted instinctively, executing an axe kick that sent the heavy doors crashing to the floor. Ojiro pushed the door aside, revealing the figure responsible for the chaos. Mirko, the rabbit hero, announced her arrival with enthusiasm, and Midoriya couldn't help but smirk at her familiar presence. She greeted him warmly and inquired about his arm, to which he replied it was better. Aizawa, however, requested Mirko to refrain from kicking indoors, to which she shrugged apologetically. Introducing herself to the group, Mirko expressed her excitement to meet everyone. Mineta introduced himself as the most manly man in 2A, which sent Mirko into fits of laughter. She playfully declared that Midoriya was the true manliest among them, causing him to blush slightly. Kirishima insisted it was him instead, but Bakugo interrupted, claiming the title for himself. Mirko quickly pointed out Midoriya's resilience after a tough battle, emphasizing his bravery. Midoriya suggested they agree to disagree, but Mirko playfully smacked him on the back of the head, insisting they would not. Mirko confirmed she would handle lower body combat training, specifically for Midoriya, Iida, and Ojiro. The group moved to a section of the gym filled with punching bags and practice dummies. Mirko expressed her familiarity with Midoriya's skills but wanted to see what Iida and Ojiro could do. They proposed some light sparring, and Mirko encouraged them to go ahead. After a few minutes of quick exchanges, Mirko called for a change in strategy. She instructed them to fight without using quirks, allowing Ojiro to use his tail but forbidding Iida from using his engines. Midoriya nodded in agreement. As the sparring began, Iida and Ojiro charged at Midoriya, who skillfully dodged their attacks. After playing defense for a while, he decided to take action, sweeping Iida's legs and delivering a series of quick strikes to Ojiro, knocking him down. As Iida attempted to recover, Midoriya blocked his kick and countered with a well-timed strike that sent Iida to the ground, breathless. Mirko paused the match, questioning why both Iida and Ojiro had targeted Midoriya. He explained that there was a personal grudge against him, as many in the class, including them, disliked him. Mirko pressed for details, and Iida admitted that Midoriya was perceived as cocky and annoying. Midoriya chuckled, recalling a previous fight where he had defeated 15 classmates, which astonished Mirko. She expressed disbelief at his accomplishment, and he recounted how he had challenged anyone willing to fight him before leaving for the summer. Mirko shook her head, impressed by his determination. Iida needed to work on 2 things. First, he almost always threw rib-level kicks. Second, he appeared to be waiting for a power boost when executing his kicks, likely due to his quirk. Mirko instructed him to set up in front of a dummy and practice high kicks, axe kicks, and roundhouses. While the ribs were weak, they could still take several hits. She advised him to aim for more vulnerable areas, particularly the knees and head. Ojiro, who had years of martial arts experience and was skilled at fighting without his tail, needed to be more aggressive. Mirko told him to hit a bag continuously, throwing kicks, punches, and anything else as fast as he could for as long as he could. The 2 boys nodded and began to work on her instructions. Midoriya wondered what he would do next, and Mirko smirked at him. She told him he was going to fight her, and he grinned widely, asking if she was sure about that. She confidently replied that she could handle anything but requested he not be too rough. He tried to hide his blush at her playful tone. With a crack of his knuckles, he prepared himself. When Mirko shouted to start, she leaped toward him, delivering a powerful high kick aimed at his temple. He raised his arm to block the kick with his forearm. Mirko praised his reaction speed as she dodged a low kick from him and leaped above him. As she descended, she shouted, "Luna fall," her leg poised to strike. Activating Incarcio, he held his arms above his head in an X shape, bracing for impact. Her heel connected with his forearms, and the force caused the ground to crack, creating a small crater. Mirko sprang off him, using her other leg to evade his grasp. She expressed her surprise, noting that most people were slammed into the ground when hit by her Luna fall. Midoriya checked his forearms for damage and reassured her that he was not like most people. He deactivated Incarcio and activated full cowl at 30%, declaring it was time to go. He leaped forward, feinting a kick at her head. As she dodged to the left, he revealed his true intention. He shouted, "St. Louis Smash, Air Force," swinging his leg and creating a massive wave of air that blew her back several meters, though she managed to stay on her feet. Mirko acknowledged his impressive move but challenged him with a spinning leap, unleashing a flurry of blows. As she shouted, "Luna Ring," he smirked, having figured out her pattern. When she began to ask how much longer she could hold up, he caught her leg mid-spin and, using her momentum, spun around and slammed her into the ground. He let go of her leg and stepped back, and she slowly stood up, looking a bit woozy. She smiled, impressed that he had countered her attack. Midoriya asked if she was sure she could continue, not wanting to hurt her. She confidently replied that it would take a lot to take her down and leaped toward him, almost faster than he could react. As she leaped at his head with a wild grin, he raised his hands to protect himself, but she wrapped her legs around his neck and forearms, twisting her body behind him. Shifting her weight backward, they both fell to the ground. She mocked him, asking how he would escape the headlock. He smirked, confident in his abilities. He replied that he would break the lock, pulling his arms free and grabbing her ankles to unlock them. Using full cowl at 50%, he wrenched her legs open and got to his feet, delivering an axe kick that struck the ground beside her. As she struggled to rise, holding her stomach, she mumbled that he had done well. Concerned, he approached her, but she smirked and kicked his ankle, causing him to drop to one knee. She quickly got up, ran around him, and kicked him in the back, knocking him to the ground. Planting a knee in his back, she wrenched his arm behind him, instructing him never to end a fight until the opponent was unable to continue. He defiantly told her to make him yield, and she wrenched his arm harder, nearly dislocating it. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out in pain. She suggested he yield, and he sighed in response. Activating Black Whip, he wrapped it around her left arm and yanked hard, causing her to fall off him and release his arm. He scrambled to his feet, and she complimented his strength and conscience, warning him that a villain might exploit that. With a smirk, he decided to get serious. Using Incarcio and 30% full cowl, he leaped toward her, feinting a kick at her ribs. She moved to catch his foot but missed the right hook that struck her left cheek, sending her tumbling to the ground. He leaped forward, swinging a powerful axe kick near her head, creating a massive crater. Slowly, he placed a knee on her gut, holding a finger up and charging with 45%, preparing to unleash air force at its fullest. He told her to yield, not wanting to put her in the hospital. She chuckled, teasing him about being on top of a woman. While he felt a slight blush, he maintained his position and insisted she yield, knowing he could seriously injure her if he wanted to. Finally, she relented, declaring that she yielded to the better fighter. He released the pressure on her gut and helped her to her feet. She complimented his performance, admitting he would leave her with bruises. He suggested she visit Recovery Girl, and she smirked, asking if he felt sorry for her. He chuckled, explaining that he knew she was tougher than she let on. As they watched Iida struggle with his axe kick, Ojiro was doing better, though still tired. "How long did the fight last?" the protagonist asked, glancing at Mirko, who was checking the clock. "About 30 minutes or so," Mirko replied, and the protagonist was taken aback. "That was longer than I thought," they said with a shrug. "All right, you two can stop. Get some water, all three of you," Mirko instructed. The protagonist nodded, grabbed a water bottle from their backpack, and drank half of it in one go, realizing just how fatigued they were. "Who won?" Iida inquired, and the protagonist looked up at him. "I did," they answered calmly, causing Iida to narrow his eyes in disbelief. "No way. There's no way you beat her," he insisted, and the protagonist shrugged in response. "What more do you want me to say, Iida? I won, she lost." "It's pretty simple," they stated, standing up and attempting to walk past him, but he blocked their path with his arm. "You're lying. And even if you're not, how could you defeat a woman who is supposed to be your teacher?" he challenged. The protagonist sighed and pushed his arm down. "She said she wanted to fight, and I didn't hold back. Neither did she. Also, I didn't beat her up, I won the fight by forcing a yield." "I can be civilized, unlike you apparently," they retorted, trying to walk past him again, but he stepped in front of them once more, escalating their frustration. "Apologize to her. You should never hit a woman, under any circumstances," Iida insisted, and the protagonist let out a laugh. "If Toga Himiko came at me with a knife, are you saying you wouldn't defend yourself? Your chivalry is going to get you into trouble," they chuckled, pushing past him again, eager to avoid the confrontation. "Apologize, Midoriya," Iida shouted, grabbing the back of their collar. In a moment of frustration, the protagonist reacted swiftly, delivering a strong roundhouse kick that sent Iida to one knee, clutching his head. "Iida, for once in your life, listen. Yes, Mirko and I fought, but you don't need to treat her like some damsel in distress. She could easily handle herself, especially if she got serious. Now, go to Recovery Girl and get yourself taken care of," they snapped, walking back over to Mirko and Ojiro, who were engaged in conversation. "Where's Iida?" Mirko asked. "Going to Recovery Girl. Something about a hamstring." "I don't know," the protagonist replied, lying to avoid further complications. "All right, well, let's get back to it. Ojiro, return to your training. Izuku, I want you to do the same thing he's doing. Get to it," she commanded, clapping her hands to signal the start of their next session. I woke up the next morning, staring at the ceiling. It was nearly 8 a.m., much later than I usually woke up, but I needed the rest. Sitting up in bed, I decided to take a shower since I hadn't the night before. I grabbed a change of clothes and stepped into the hot water, feeling at home for the first time since I arrived. As I walked into the living room, I greeted my mom. However, I quickly noticed her expression. She seemed a bit upset as she remarked that she hadn't known my grandfather had given me a motorcycle. I shrugged, admitting it must have slipped my mind the night before. She pointed out that I couldn't even drive it yet, but I shook my head, explaining that the age limit for motorcycles had been lowered to my mom's side, expressing her disapproval and reminding me that I would need to pay for everything myself. I nodded, assuring her that I had the money, a parting gift from Grandpa amounting to about $3,000, which I planned to exchange soon. She questioned how I intended to get my license and reminded me that I would need a helmet as well. I assured her I planned to take the test that day, mentioning that my provisional hero license should give me some priority. I also promised to buy a helmet. My mom nodded, still skeptical, and asked if I would take the train. I confirmed this, grabbing the envelope filled with cash, my phone, and my red high tops before heading out. Before going to the test, I stopped by a motorcycle shop to buy a green helmet and a black leather jacket for protection on the road. After acing the test, I obtained my license and filled up the motorcycle with gas from a station a few blocks away. With everything set, I decided to take it out for a spin, not expecting what would happen next. Over the next 2 weeks, Iida, Ojiro, and I made significant progress. Iida developed new kicks for his recipro burst, while Ojiro's endurance improved remarkably. My constant sparring with Mirko and my intense speed training enhanced my reaction time. On the final day, after a close match between Iida, Ojiro, and me, which I barely won, Mirko congratulated us and proposed a party at her place to celebrate our hard work. I was surprised and asked why. She beamed, saying she wanted to honor our efforts. Mina, overhearing our conversation, chimed in about the party. I tried to deny it, but Mirko insisted, shouting for everyone to join her celebration. Class 2A erupted in cheers, except for a few dissenters. Bakugo shouted his disapproval, and I sighed, playfully urging him to lighten up, especially since his girlfriend would be there, drawn to the drama. I then cheekily flipped him off. Iida called out to me, but I laughed and announced I was going to change. As I attempted to escape, Mirko tackled me, landing on top with a mischievous grin. She said she needed to give me her phone number and address first, which felt oddly threatening. I asked why it sounded like a threat, and she smirked, suggesting it might be. She grabbed my hand and pulled out a Sharpie, writing down her details before standing up and pulling me with her. She instructed me to share the address, stating the party would start at 7 and expected everyone to attend. As she walked away, I shook my head, trying to dry my hair a bit. Mineta and Kaminari rushed over, asking why I had been so calm with Mirko on top of me. I replied that I could control myself better than they could. They looked a bit annoyed, and Mineta pointed out my defensiveness. I told him he needed to learn to manage his impulses before he got himself into trouble, then walked off, leaving him with that vague warning. A few hours later, at 4 p.m., after taking a shower and relaxing a bit, Izuku texted Mirko. He had already shared the address with everyone, and they all planned to take the train, but he decided to ride his motorcycle instead. Mirko responded, noting that he took longer than expected. Izuku mentioned he was tired, but Mirko doubted it and asked if he was ready to party. Izuku admitted he wasn't really into partying, but Mirko insisted that would change tonight. Izuku challenged her on that, and she accepted, saying she would talk to him later. Lying back on his bed, Izuku stretched and checked the time. It was already 5 p.m., so he quickly changed into black joggers, a gray shirt, and a dark green hoodie. He grabbed his phone, headphones, and helmet before heading downstairs to wait. While watching TV, he stumbled upon a disturbing news report about a male suspect in his early 30s with a powerful quirk capable of nullifying others' abilities. The report detailed a series of assaults on young women, leaving Izuku feeling increasingly disgusted. Kirishima entered the room, dressed in a red t-shirt with the kanji for Crimson Riot, and sat next to Izuku. He expressed his surprise that the perpetrator hadn't been caught yet. Kirishima suggested Izuku should leave soon since Mirko would want him there early. He mentioned that according to Mina, Mirko had a crush on Izuku, which made him blush. Kirishima teased him about it, but Izuku remained non-committal. When Kirishima asked where he was going, Izuku explained he needed to leave for the party due to potential traffic. He put on his helmet and rode his bike through the streets of Tokyo, arriving at Mirko's building. After parking, he entered and headed for the elevators, pressing the button for the penthouse. A man approached him, questioning why he was trying to access the penthouse. After confirming that Mirko lived there, Izuku explained he was invited to a party. The man laughed, claiming Mirko didn't host parties and that it was his duty to protect her. Izuku found the man's attitude amusing and challenged him, easily dodging his attempts to intimidate. After a brief scuffle, Izuku subdued the man, giving him advice about picking on someone with his skills. As the man struggled to get up, he shouted about Mirko being a goddess. Izuku, feeling fed up, swiftly ended the confrontation. Security arrived, and after a few questions, they took the man away. Missing the elevator, Izuku finally entered and was surprised to find it was nearly 7 p.m. The elevator ride was quick, and when the doors opened, he was taken aback by the luxurious living space. Mirko appeared, accompanied by a man who introduced himself as Yuga Usajiyama, Mirko's brother. They shook hands, and Yuga revealed he was aware of Izuku's reputation for defeating Mirko in a spar. He then pulled Izuku into a friendly embrace, expressing his approval. Yuga also mentioned that Mirko had a crush on Izuku, prompting a playful response from Mirko, who denied it but seemed amused. Yuga explained that he was a DJ and had come to help Mirko with the party. Izuku chuckled, thinking that it was hard to say no to her. She was intimidating, which earned me a light smack to the back of the head. She insisted that I shouldn't encourage him, and I couldn't help but smirk. I thought it was a good idea to encourage him, glancing at Yuga for confirmation. He enthusiastically agreed, holding out his fist for a bump, and I returned it with a grin. Yuga celebrated his small victory, exclaiming that he was ahead in our playful rivalry, and I laughed along with him. Once Yuga was settled, she asked for my help with something and pulled me deeper into the apartment, leading us to her bedroom. She handed me a set of boxes, urging me to take them. I was curious about their contents as I carried them into the main room. She excitedly revealed that they were party favors, tearing one box open to show me a collection of bags. As she handed one to me, I discovered a mix of sweets and a plush toy. To my surprise, it was a Mirko plush, and I couldn't help but admire how cute it was. I decided I was going to keep it. Mirko explained that someone had sent her a bunch of samples for free, hoping to strike a deal. Then Yuga brought up an encounter he had witnessed in the lobby, asking if a random guy had stopped her on her way up. I smirked, recalling the incident. I mentioned that I had dealt with the guy, who had tried to push past me, claiming to be her protector. Mirko sighed, acknowledging that she had heard complaints from the apartment staff but hadn't anticipated it escalating to that level. I shrugged, remarking that some people would always act that way, which made her chuckle. Just then, the elevator dinged, and several friends stepped out, including Kirishima, Mina, Tokoyami, Sato, and Koda. They entered the apartment, taking in the impressive space. Mina was particularly surprised to see me, her expression shifting to one of excitement. Kirishima quietly reminded her to keep her thoughts in check, while I explained that I had simply misjudged the traffic. Mirko then excitedly presented the party favors to our new guests, urging them to open them up. Curious about the rest of our friends, I asked where they were, and Kirishima informed me that they were all in the lobby, as the elevator had reached its limit. I nodded in understanding, and Mirko, with a bright smile, declared that it was time to get the party started. Her brother immediately began pumping music, setting the atmosphere for a fun evening ahead. 3 hours into the party, the atmosphere had become quite lively. Several couples were sharing affectionate moments in the corners, including Mina and Kirishima, which made me happy for him. I noticed Kaminari and Jiro chatting for a while before they shared a kiss, but that didn't concern me much. I stepped out onto the balcony, where it was a bit quieter, and took a sip from an energy drink. Mirko had really gone all out with the refreshments, providing an array of energy drinks and various kinds of cake. Mirko joined me on the balcony and asked if I was done with the party. I explained that I just needed a moment to gather my thoughts and avoid the overwhelming noise. She chuckled, acknowledging that her brother had a tendency to crank up the music. After a few moments of comfortable silence, Mirko inquired about my desire to become a hero. I took a moment to reflect on my answer, which had evolved over the years. I shared that for a long time, I aspired to be like All Might, but after attending UA, I realized I wanted to forge my own path as a hero. I wanted to help everyone, regardless of the circumstances. Mirko seemed surprised to learn that I had once idolized All Might. I smiled and admitted that I still did, but my perspective had changed. I had witnessed All Might at his lowest and understood that even the strongest heroes had their vulnerabilities. Mirko commented on my powerful quirk, expressing her surprise that I hadn't realized this sooner. I explained that for 14 years, I had been quirkless and faced bullying and isolation. I had looked up to All Might because he represented something I thought I could never achieve. Mirko shared her own story, recalling how a hero with a quirk similar to hers had saved her when she was about 5 years old. That moment had inspired her to pursue a career as a hero. I remarked that she was quite interesting, noting how quickly she had risen through the hero ranks. I admired her dedication to protecting civilians and tackling crime on both small and large scales. While many saw her as overconfident, I recognized her genuine care for others. She had even taken a temporary teaching job solely to help others, not for personal gain. Mirko then acknowledged my own interesting qualities, standing beside me on the balcony and resting her hand close to mine. I felt a warmth in that moment. She complimented my sense of humor and humility, noting how hard I worked and how I wasn't afraid to get hurt to help others. She recounted the day we met, describing how I had bravely intervened in a dangerous situation, stopping a massive boar and fighting off several powerful villains, even sustaining injuries in the process. Her admiration for my bravery was evident. As she lightly touched my hand, I turned to look at her. Her small hand felt comforting. Mirko then expressed that she needed to tell me something important, leaning closer as she prepared to share her thoughts. Suddenly, Kirishima burst onto the balcony, exclaiming that I was missing a great party. Mirko and I jumped apart, and Kirishima awkwardly asked if he had interrupted something. I shot him a glare, telling him he had, and he quickly backed away. I turned back to Mirko, wanting to know what she had intended to say, but she simply shook her head and headed inside. I lingered on the balcony for a few more moments before slamming my hand on the railing in frustration and following her inside. I grabbed my helmet and made my way down to the lobby, riding my motorcycle back to the dorms. Once in my room, I slowly drifted off to sleep, listening only to the sound of my own breathing. When I regain my ability to move, I stand up and immediately check on Mirko for any visible injuries. She has several bruises, a bloody nose, and what appears to be a broken finger or two. Frustration wells up inside me. That guy deserves the worst for what he did. I remove my school jacket and shirt, draping them over Mirko's shoulders to cover her as much as possible, leaving me in just a black tank top and my school pants. I lift Mirko into my arms, cradling her gently, and activate full cowl at 30%, sprinting at full speed toward the hospital. Upon bursting into the hospital, the doctors quickly assess the situation, even as I stutter through my explanation. They take Mirko to a room and instruct me to wait in the lobby. I pace anxiously for nearly 30 minutes before the doctor returns. I immediately ask about Mirko's condition, and she lets out a sigh. She informs me that Mirko has several bruises, a bloody nose, and 2 broken fingers, just as I suspected. The doctor mentions uncertainty about how the fingers were broken but suggests it might be a hyperextension injury. Before she can continue, I interrupt, stating the harsh truth about what happened to Mirko. The doctor flinches slightly at my bluntness, but I am enraged. The doctor confirms my fears without going into detail and asks if I can explain what happened based on what I witnessed. I nod and recount the events as best as I can. When she inquires if I have contacted the police, I shake my head, explaining that my priority was getting Mirko to the hospital first. I express my determination to find the person responsible, my anger boiling over as I crack my knuckles. The doctor places a gentle hand on my shoulder, cautioning me against seeking revenge, but I refuse to back down. I assert my identity as a UA student, vowing to find the perpetrator and ensure he faces justice. The doctor warns me that I am too angry to handle this situation properly, urging me to let the police take care of it. I reluctantly agree but ask if Mirko is awake. The doctor shakes her head, informing me that she has been knocked unconscious and there is no telling how long she will remain that way. Frustrated, I decide to grab my bike and ask the doctor to call me when she wakes up. As I rush outside, my phone buzzes with a text from Kiribro, asking if I have seen the news. I respond, inquiring about what happened. Kiri informs me that someone posted NDE photos of Mirko online, and the news is all over it. A fresh wave of rage surges through me, and I grip my phone tightly, fearing I might break it. I start my bike and check a few news sites, confirming the terrible news. This individual has sealed his fate. I speed through the streets of Tokyo, heading back to UA. Upon arriving at the dorm, I enter and collapse onto the couch, my mind racing with thoughts of where that man could be. Kirishima walks in with Mina, and a few others follow, but I can barely focus on their presence. Kirishima asks if I am okay, and I respond with a heavy sigh, feeling far from fine. Mina notices my silence and asks about my lack of response to Kiri's texts, wondering if it has to do with Mirko. As I struggle to contain my emotions, I reveal the truth about what happened to Mirko, tears streaming down my face. Mina's shock is palpable as I describe the horrific scene I witnessed, feeling utterly powerless. Kirishima tries to comfort me, reminding me that I did get her to the hospital, but I snap back, frustrated that as heroes, we are supposed to protect others and bring justice. I express my anger at feeling helpless while witnessing someone I care about in such a vulnerable state. Mina catches on to my feelings for Mirko, and despite the gravity of the situation, I chuckle at the realization. Kirishima asks where Mirko is now, and I inform them that she is in the hospital, unconscious, with 2 broken fingers and a bloody nose. Just then, Bakugo enters, mocking me for crying. I prepare to explain the situation, but Kirishima tries to intervene. I stand up, facing my classmates, including those who may not like me. I share the painful truth about Mirko's condition, and the room falls silent in shock. Ojiro approaches, disbelief written on his face, and I try to reassure him, but he lashes out, punching me in surprise. As Kirishima restrains him, I remind everyone of Mirko's strength and how she was taken down by this man. Ojiro eventually calms down, and Iida asks if I know who did this. I explain that I have a face but not a name, and I plan to search through police records for leads. Ojiro offers to help, feeling indebted to Mirko for all she has done for them. Iida and Todoroki join in, expressing their determination to seek justice. Yaoyorozu and Kaminari also pledge their support, stating that they owe it to her. However, Bakugo and Uraraka remain distant, with Uraraka declaring her reluctance to help, while Bakugo expresses his disdain for me but emphasizes his hatred for RPSS even more. Bakugo declared his intention to help, a determined look on his face. The protagonist smirked slightly in response. They were ready to take on the challenge together, dragging their target to the depths of despair, reminiscent of Dante's journey. The protagonist extended a hand for a shake, and Bakugo accepted it with reluctance. Turning to Uraraka, the protagonist inquired about her lack of involvement. Uraraka firmly stated her refusal to cooperate. The protagonist pressed for a reason, but her answers were vague and unyielding, leading to a growing frustration. The protagonist pointed out that even Bakugo was participating, which made Uraraka's refusal stand out. Bakugo, ever the provocateur, urged her to reconsider, questioning what she had to lose. Yaoyorozu joined in, emphasizing the importance of their mission for Mirko. Just then, a phone call interrupted the moment. The protagonist answered, recognizing the voice of the doctor from the hospital. The doctor informed them that Mirko was awake and had asked for the protagonist. Excitement surged through the group as the protagonist learned that Mirko wanted to speak with them. After confirming they would be there soon, the protagonist felt a surge of determination. They promised to provide an update once they reached the hospital, quickly grabbing their helmet and preparing to leave. I walked into the hospital and approached the doctor, who guided me to Mirko's room. I nodded my thanks, and she returned the gesture before heading off to attend to another patient. Slowly, I opened the door and stepped inside. Mirko sat in her bed, gazing out the window when I entered. She turned her head sharply to look at me, tears glistening in her vibrant red eyes. She asked if it was true, and I understood immediately what she meant. I replied quietly, confirming her fears based on what I had seen and what the doctor had said. Her tears flowed more freely, and I rushed to her side, pulling her into a tight embrace without thinking. She sobbed into my shoulder, struggling to find her words. I reassured her that I would find the person responsible, promising that I would not rest until I did. Mirko, still leaning against me, asked if I had found her. I confirmed that I had, but lamented that I hadn't been able to catch the perpetrator. I rubbed her back gently in small circles, trying to comfort her. She inquired about what I would do if I caught him, and I felt a tension in my chest. I expressed my frustration, wishing I could send him to an early grave, but acknowledged the existence of laws. Mirko chuckled softly at my dark humor, and I smirked in response. She leaned against me, and I adjusted my grip, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. Despite her muscular build, she felt small in my embrace. I reminded her that ultimately, it was her choice what would happen to him. She asked what I meant, and I explained that while I would catch him, what came next was up to her. She nodded slowly, and then asked if I would kill him if she wanted me to. I considered her question seriously and told her that if she truly wanted him dead, I would not hesitate. She was surprised by my answer, and I confessed my feelings for her, which made her turn to face me. Seizing the moment, I leaned in and lightly kissed her. She tensed at first but quickly relaxed. When I pulled away, she admitted that she liked it, and then kissed me again. We both smiled as she rested her head on my shoulder once more. Curious about who knew our secret, she asked, and I responded that Class 2A and probably half of the internet were aware. Mirko expressed her anger at the thought, especially when I mentioned that the culprit had posted revealing photos of her. I clenched my fist in frustration, feeling the weight of the situation. Mirko acknowledged the impending media frenzy, and I confirmed that while they didn't know her location yet, it wouldn't be long before they came knocking. She expressed her reluctance to deal with them and asked how I would handle it if they recognized her. I smirked, confident that I could scare them off, which made her laugh. Just then, there was a knock at the door. I sprang to my feet as it slid open, revealing Yuga along with a man and woman who appeared to be Mirko's parents. Her father had bunny ears, while her mother did not, suggesting she might be quirkless. Her mother rushed to her, asking if she was okay, and Mirko, beginning to cry, reassured her that she was all right. Her father then turned to me, demanding to know who I was. Yuga stepped in, introducing me as a friend of Mirko and a nice guy. I introduced myself, extending my hand, but her father did not shake it. I explained that I had helped Mirko during the Boar Gang incident and that she had trained me at UA for 2 weeks. Mirko then spoke up, revealing that I was the one who saved her after the incident. Her mother's gratitude was palpable as she hugged me tightly, thanking me for saving her daughter. However, her father's next question caught me off guard. He bluntly asked if I had seen Mirko naked. I sighed, knowing this would lead to trouble. I confirmed it, and chaos erupted with 2 screams of anger and Mirko's father and brother throwing punches in my direction. Mirko shouted for them to stop, and they halted, fists poised dangerously close to my face. She asserted that I had saved her and that she didn't care about the circumstances, pleading with them not to harm me. Her declaration of love for me brought a wave of relief. Her mother was shocked by Mirko's admission, while Yuga chuckled, mentioning our earlier attempt at a kiss, which earned me a fierce glare from her father. I reiterated my feelings for Mirko and my determination to catch the one responsible for her pain, but I also acknowledged the limitations of the law. Her mother then asked if I knew who had done this, and I shook my head, explaining that I had a face but not a name. I planned to visit the police station for leads, assuring them that my entire class at UA was behind this mission. As I prepared to leave, Mirko's father followed me into the hallway. He asked about my intentions regarding the culprit, and I expressed my desire to confront him. I explained that while I would give him a beating, the legal system would ultimately decide his fate. Mirko's father nodded, deep in thought, and I sensed the weight of his concern for his daughter. First, if he poses a significant threat to civilians in the area, then yes, I could take him down. Second, if he harms another hero, I have the legal right to act. But only in those 2 situations. The response was firm and resolute. A promise was made, a request to send the suspect straight to jail when caught. A nod confirmed the commitment, and then the individual walked out of the hospital, only to be surrounded by a throng of reporters. Rumors had spread that the rising pro-hero Mirko had been assaulted and was possibly in this hospital. A reporter pressed for information, shoving a camera close. The response was clear: there was no information to share, and the crowd needed to back off. Another reporter recognized the individual from a previous incident and inquired about their presence in the hospital. The answer was simple: a visit to a friend, and no names would be disclosed. Pushing through the crowd, the individual reached their bike, donned a helmet, and rode to the TPD headquarters. Upon entering the building, the individual approached the reception desk, requesting to speak with whoever was in charge of the Mirko case. The receptionist was skeptical, having seen many come in claiming to have information for money. The response was direct. The individual was a student at UA High and a personal friend of Mirko, having been attacked during the incident and responsible for bringing her to the hospital. The receptionist's demeanor changed upon realizing the gravity of the situation and quickly called for Detective Tsukachi. After a brief wait, Tsukachi appeared, his expression shifting slightly upon recognizing the individual. He inquired about the information regarding the Mirko case. The individual stood up, confirming they had crucial information, and followed Tsukachi to a small conference room for privacy. The detective asked for details about the incident, and the individual recounted the events leading up to finding Mirko, providing a description of the assailant. Tsukachi sought confirmation, asking if they were sure it was the same man. The individual affirmed, insisting there was no way to forget that face. Tsukachi nodded, acknowledging the truth in the account, and requested a detailed description. As the individual described the man, their voice carried a hint of venom. Tsukachi then presented a picture, asking if it resembled the suspect. The individual confirmed it was accurate, noting the minor difference in stubble. Tsukachi realized they had encountered this man before for attempted assault, but someone had bailed him out. He left the room to retrieve the file, returning moments later with a small police dossier containing a picture of the suspect, Ishiji Kiminari, a 46-year-old unemployed man. The individual inquired about who had signed Kiminari out, and Tsukachi pointed to another name in the file, Jiren Narasama. Recognizing the name, the individual recalled Narasama's near imprisonment for a self-defense killing. Tsukachi explained they suspected a collaboration between the two, though the details remained unclear. He promised to keep the individual informed of any developments. Determined to help, the individual insisted on being involved in the pursuit of justice, stating that Class 2A was ready to assist, all holding provisional licenses. Tsukachi hesitated, citing their youth, but the individual countered with their experience in various intense situations, emphasizing the need to fulfill a promise. Tsukachi relented, agreeing to seek UA's approval for their involvement. A week later, during class, the individual received a call from Tsukachi, announcing they had located Kiminari in an abandoned apartment complex, believed to be with a gang. A meeting was scheduled for the following morning, and the individual confirmed they would bring Class 2A along with Eraserhead and Cementos. After class, the individual shared the news with their classmates, and Aizawa acknowledged the request. As the class ended, a hand landed on the individual's shoulder, and Bakugo's voice cut through the air, questioning their readiness. The individual affirmed their intent to confront the suspect, driven by a desire for justice. Kirishima cautioned against killing, but the individual clarified the difference between intention and action. Momo reminded them of the legal parameters surrounding self-defense, but the individual was aware of the laws. Aizawa overheard the conversation and asked if revenge was the motivation. The individual froze, contemplating the weight of the question. And if I am? The question hung in the air as Aizawa let out a heavy sigh. Vengeance is a dark path, he warned, and the weight of his words settled over the room. The situation was dire, but I knew I had to confront it. What would you do if Ms. Joke was harmed? I posed the question, watching as Aizawa froze, his expression shifting to one of concern. What? He replied, a tense edge creeping into his voice. He was playing coy, and I could see through it. Everyone knew about his relationship with Ms. Joke. I pressed on, urging him to consider my perspective. If Ms. Joke was harmed, and you knew where the perpetrator was, what would you do? My tone remained calm, but the gravity of the question hung heavily between us. Aizawa took a moment to respond, his reluctance evident. Probably the same thing you're doing, he finally admitted with a sigh. Midoriya, why do you want to seek revenge? Iida inquired, his eyes searching mine. I spread my arms, a gesture of frustration. Do I have a reason not to? He harmed the woman I love and humiliated her. I was surprised I hadn't found him myself already. You have every right to feel that way. But you can't act on it, Bakugo interjected, drawing everyone's attention. I know that, I replied, a hint of exasperation in my voice. Bakugo, what did you just say? Uraraka asked, her curiosity piqued. If someone hurt you, much less harmed you, there wouldn't be a place on Earth safe for them. I would go anywhere and confront that person with nothing but my bare hands, Bakugo declared, his intensity palpable. If anyone harms Momo, they will face severe consequences, Todoroki added, his voice steady. Momo blushed at his words, clearly moved by his protective stance. I agree. If anyone hurts Mina, I would ensure they regret it, Kirishima chimed in, only to receive a playful punch from Mina. I can handle myself, you know, she asserted, but before their friendly banter could escalate, I intervened. Listen, I won't seek revenge unless I have to. That's a promise. But if he gives me a reason, he won't be left unscathed, I warned, my voice low and fierce. Standing up, I walked out, the others following closely behind. The next morning, everyone rides the train to the police station, dressed in their hero costumes. A somber mood hangs over Class 2A, Aizawa, Cementos, and Midnight, who are joined by Class 2B and Shinso. Though there are barely more than 40 of them, they represent a formidable force. Upon arriving at the police station, they walk straight through the doors and into a large meeting room filled with several pro-heroes, including Hawks, Endeavor, Gang Orca, Rocklock, and the Big Three. When Mirko spots Midoriya, he approaches and gives him a warm hug. Mirko asks how Midoriya is doing, to which Midoriya responds that he could be better but is doing well under the circumstances. Mirko excitedly shares that he has regained his quirk, and Midoriya smiles in response. Midoriya mentions that he has acquired a few new quirks, prompting Mirko to express his eagerness to see them. Nijire then interrupts, curious about Midoriya's new abilities, the presence of his entire class, and the identity of the boy with purple hair, whom she points out as Shinso. Midoriya explains that he has 3 new quirks, that he is doing fine, and introduces Shinso. Once everyone is gathered, Tsukachi begins the meeting. He states that the first order of business is to discuss the reason for the man's arrest, introducing Midoriya as the one to speak. Midoriya steps forward, detailing the suspect, Ishiji Kiminari, a 46-year-old unemployed man linked to multiple crimes, including a series of assaults on heroes and the assault of pro-hero Mirko. The room falls silent as the gravity of the situation sinks in. Hawks, visibly tense, asks if Midoriya can prove his claims. Midoriya affirms that he can, revealing that he was one of the heroes attacked and had brought Mirko to the hospital. Hawks expresses his anger, stating that Mirko is a good friend and they will ensure justice is served. Endeavor adds his agreement, emphasizing that those who commit such crimes are the worst. Midoriya takes his seat as Tsukachi continues, explaining that they believe the suspect is hiding in an abandoned apartment complex. He outlines the plan to split the heroes into 8 teams, with a total of 65 members. Midoriya quickly finds his team, Team 4 Beta, consisting of Hawks, Mirko, Gang Orca, Bakugo, Shinso, Kendo, Shiozaki, and himself. Bakugo grumbles about being on the same team as Midoriya, which prompts a light-hearted exchange between them. Hawks asks about their strengths, and Midoriya lists his abilities, showcasing his versatility. The others share their skills, with Mirko declaring Midoriya the best in close combat, a sentiment echoed by Bakugo. Hawks organizes their formation, assigning Midoriya, Gang Orca, and Mirko as the frontline, while Shiozaki and Bakugo support from behind, with Hawks, Kendo, and Shinso providing backup. Everyone agrees to the plan. Before they depart, Tsukachi outlines the rules of engagement, emphasizing non-lethal methods and capture unless absolutely necessary. Bakugo questions whether they will adhere to those rules, but Midoriya reassures him that he will, even if he is eager to confront the suspect. As the group heads outside to armored vehicles, Hawks inquires if Midoriya will be flying, to which Midoriya confirms, demonstrating his ability to float several meters off the ground. Plus, it's less tiring than my other form that allows me to fly, so this is better. The armored vehicles begin to pull away, and they follow them, keeping low to the ground, with only about 2.5 meters between them and the ground. When they arrive, the complex is eerily silent, but only for a few seconds. A shout pierces the air as someone yells about a grenade, followed by a loud explosion. Team 4 Beat scrambles out of the armored vehicle as bullets start flying. Small arms fire mixes with larger caliber rounds, creating fist-sized chips in the asphalt. They express their surprise at the unexpected intensity of the situation. Kendo asks what they should do, and an idea strikes. Gang Orca is instructed to create the loudest sonic blast possible when given the signal. With Incarcio activated, they rush toward Jiro. Midoriya slides next to her and explains the plan. Jiro finds the idea insane but exciting. Kirishima is assigned to provide cover, and everyone prepares for action. On the signal, Kirishima pops out from behind the armored truck, with Jiro directly behind him. She unleashes her most powerful sonic blast, followed closely by Gang Orca. The gunfire stalls momentarily. Midoriya calls for everyone to get inside quickly, directing the teams to enter the building in an organized manner. After a few moments, he sends in Team 3 Alpha and 4 Beta, as Team 3 Beta is Jiro's group. Now comes the hard part. They must advance while taking fire from at least the 3rd and 4th floors. Bakugo is tasked with creating a massive flashbang. Once he does, Gang Orca and Jiro are to release their sonic waves, and then everyone will sprint to the entrance on command. The plan unfolds as Bakugo creates a blinding light, and the sonic waves are released. Their groups break into a sprint, with Midoriya and Hawks waiting a moment before following. They enter the lobby and witness dozens of villains being dragged out. They question the number of enemies, and Hawks estimates there are hundreds. They rush past the 2nd and 3rd floors, arriving at the lobby of the 4th. They pause as Shiozaki conducts reconnaissance. To the left is an open hallway filled with multiple villains, while the hallway to the right has a solid steel door. Midoriya curses upon realizing that Kaminari is likely behind that door. Kirishima volunteers to take the left with his team, leading them into the hallway. Midoriya approaches the steel door cautiously, noting the lack of visible hinges. Bakugo questions how they know it's a door, and Shiozaki points to a panel with a keypad on the far wall. They realize they need to breach the door. Midoriya explains that it opens inward, suggesting they could blast it open. Bakugo eagerly accepts the challenge and charges at the door, using one of his ultimate moves to create a significant hole. Midoriya instructs everyone to stand back and prepares to kick the door open with a powerful strike. The door slams open, and they immediately come under fire from small arms. Midoriya calls for Gang Orca, who uses his sound waves to freeze the villains in place. Bakugo, Shiozaki, and Hawks take the opportunity to eliminate any visible threats, while Midoriya, Gang Orca, and Mirko move in to handle close combat. Eventually, they reach the end of the hall, where another smaller steel door blocks access to an apartment. Midoriya decides to handle the situation himself and activates Incarcio. He kicks the door in, which slams against the wall, revealing Kaminari armed with a knife and a gun. Kaminari is shocked to see him. Midoriya rushes forward, grabbing him by the throat and slamming him against the wall, causing the plaster to crack. He announces the charges against Kaminari, pulling out HNDCFFS. Kaminari defiantly claims he won't be arrested and reveals a small detonator. Midoriya shouts for everyone to get out as Kaminari presses the button. They hear several small explosions, and the floor collapses beneath them. Midoriya and Kaminari fall through the floors, landing on the ground floor. The impact jolts Midoriya out of his scaled form. Kaminari taunts him as he shoots, the bullet striking Midoriya's leg and causing him to scream in pain. Kaminari approaches and kicks him in the face, knocking his head to the ground. Midoriya, in agony, expresses his defiance as Kaminari looms over him with a raised knife. Kaminari returns the insult as he stabs downward. Midoriya instinctively raises his hand, and the blade pierces through his palm. In a desperate move, he finds a piece of rebar and rams it deep into Kaminari's throat. Blood sprays everywhere as Kaminari collapses to the side, leaving the knife embedded in Midoriya's palm. Leaning against the wall, Midoriya watches Kaminari bleed out. He coldly remarks about Kaminari's fate just as Bakugo lands in front of him, shocked by the scene. Midoriya groans. covered in blood with Kiminari lying in a pool of it. Bakugo questions if he did that, and Midoriya confirms it while pointing to his own bloody thigh. Bakugo, frustrated, insists they need to get Midoriya to an ambulance and approaches him. He slung my arm around his shoulder, and they walked out into the hall, where Aizawa spotted them. He approached, concern evident in his voice as he asked what had happened. Midoriya explained that he had been injured and needed to go to the hospital. As they exited the complex, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Upon arriving at the hospital, Midoriya realized he had lost a significant amount of blood and struggled to see clearly. The doctors quickly took him into surgery, and he was put under anesthesia. When he woke up, he found his thigh and hand wrapped in bandages, restricting his movement. Dressed in loose white pants and a shirt, he attempted to swing his legs out of bed but found his path blocked by someone. He gently shook his mother awake, and when she recognized him, she exclaimed his name and enveloped him in a tight hug that nearly crushed him. He reminded her that he needed to breathe, and she quickly apologized, letting go. However, she then slapped him across the face, leaving him bewildered. As he questioned her actions, he noticed her tear-stained expression, and his anger faded, replaced by guilt. His mother expressed her distress over his injuries, acknowledging that while he had acted to stop a villain, she was terrified he could have died. Midoriya reassured her that he was okay and insisted he was tough enough to handle it. Just then, Bakugo burst into the room, prompting Midoriya to tell him to be quiet as the rest of Class 2A followed. Kirishima asked how Midoriya was feeling, and he shrugged, admitting he was better than before but still struggling with mobility and writing. His mother smacked him on the back of the head for his language, and Iida chimed in with appreciation, eliciting a laugh from Midoriya. Midoriya questioned if they had come to gloat, but the class members looked down, shaking their heads. Iida apologized for how they had treated him, and the others nodded in agreement. Midoriya dismissed their concerns, stating that they had helped him take down the villain who had harmed Mirko, thus redeeming themselves in his eyes. Tokoyami asked if he was sure, and Midoriya confirmed that their assistance in such a dangerous situation was significant. Bakugo interjected, clarifying that it wasn't just a personal grudge but a collective need for justice. Midoriya's mother tensed at Bakugo's words, and Midoriya explained that the man they were discussing was dead. His mother's expression shifted as she asked if he had killed him. Midoriya sighed and admitted that he had acted in self-defense during a life-threatening encounter. Aizawa entered the room, offering support for Midoriya's actions, explaining that the man had posed a severe threat. His mother struggled to process the information, and Bakugo reiterated that Midoriya had simply defended himself. Though still sad, she accepted their words. Just then, Mirko entered the room, dressed casually. She approached Midoriya, concerned about his injuries. He hesitated and jokingly suggested a motorcycle accident, but she saw through the lie. He then confessed that he had been part of a police and hero operation to apprehend the man who had harmed her, and in the process, he had killed him. Mirko was silent for a moment before asking if he had any choice in the matter. He explained that while he had to react in the moment, he had not wanted to take a life. Mirko then asked if he would be okay, and he assured her that he would be fine, having faced worse challenges before. She smiled and, to his surprise, leaned in to kiss him gently. When she pulled away, he felt a blush rise to his cheeks. He reminded her that they were not alone, but she seemed unfazed. Suddenly, the room erupted with noise as Bakugo, Mineta, and the rest of Class 2A reacted to the kiss, with Bakugo demanding to know how Midoriya had ended up with such a remarkable girlfriend. Amidst the chaos, Midoriya's mother cried tears of joy, exclaiming her pride in her son having a girlfriend. Mineta, still in disbelief, was dragged away by Kaminari and Siro as he shouted questions. Iida and Midoriya's mother simultaneously scolded the group for their language, but Mirko quickly silenced everyone, asserting that Midoriya needed rest. She asked the others to leave, allowing only Midoriya's mother to stay. Once alone, Mirko pulled up a chair and asked Midoriya to recount what had happened during the raid. He began to explain the events, detailing the challenges he faced to reach the villain. Mirko listened intently, astonished that he had fought through so many adversaries to reach one person. Midoriya admitted that he had focused solely on his target, viewing the others as mere obstacles in his path. He continued sharing the story, determined to convey the full extent of his experience. I shared the story about the massive door and the fight through the hallway. I described how we reached the end of the corridor, where a solid steel door stood. I kicked it open and found Kiminari inside, armed with a gun and a knife. I rushed into the apartment and seized his throat, attempting to apprehend him. In response, he revealed a detonator and caused the floor beneath us to explode. We fell through 3 floors and landed hard on the ground level. He then shot me in the thigh, and as I staggered back, he kicked me in the head. Kneeling over me, he tried to stab me, but I managed to block the blade with my hand. In my search for something to defend myself with, I found a piece of broken rebar. Grabbing it, I move it into Kiminari's throat. As I finished recounting my experience, Mirko stood nearby, pacing the room. She acknowledged my actions, suggesting that I had acted in self-defense, and I nodded in agreement. I explained that I had simply reacted out of instinct, genuinely believing my life was in danger, and I felt no remorse for what had happened. My mother looked at me, surprised by my lack of guilt. I clarified that I couldn't save Mirko, but I had to ensure that the person who had harmed her faced justice. While I wished he could have gone to jail, I believed that his death prevented him from hurting anyone else. Just then, a doctor entered the room, introducing himself as Dr. Ishinora. I confirmed his name after reading his name tag. He informed me that, despite being shot and stabbed, I was quite lucky. The gunshot wound had missed the bones and major artery in my leg, and the stab wound had also avoided any critical damage. I would have scars, but I would be fine. He mentioned that I would need to stay overnight but could be released in the morning. After the doctor left, my mother announced she was going to get some food and water, giving me a knowing wink as she exited the room. Mirko expressed her relief that I would be okay, but I reassured her that I would be perfectly fine and urged her to stop blaming herself. Her emotions overwhelmed her, and she shouted that it was her fault for being weak. Ignoring the pain, I swung my legs out of bed and pulled her into a tight embrace, placing my hand on the back of her head as she rested against my shoulder. I told her it wasn't all her fault and that I would go to great lengths to protect her. After a moment of silence, Mirko asked why I loved her. I took a moment to think and explained that I loved everything about her, the strength of her hero persona and her softer side. She was a beautiful enigma, filled with emotion, and I admired her for being unapologetically herself. As she lifted her head, she remarked on my ability to make others feel good and then kissed me softly. When she pulled away, I smiled at her. Feeling bold, I lightly touched her ears, which caused her to flush. I quickly withdrew my hand, but she assured me it was fine. I placed my hand back on her ear, commenting on how fluffy they were, which made her chuckle. She confirmed they were bunny ears, and I jokingly asked if that meant she was like a bunny in bed. Immediately regretting my words, I apologized when I saw her shocked expression, but she burst into laughter, finding humor in my slip. She admitted to being a virgin before her recent experiences, and I felt a pang of regret for my insensitivity. I pulled her into another hug, and we stayed like that for hours, feeling content that she was okay and that we had brought the person who hurt her to justice. A few weeks later, I was sitting in the main room of the 2A dorms when I received a call from Aizawa. Life had returned to normal since my hospital stay, although Uraraka still had her moments. I wore a black shirt with the kanji for bunny on it, a gift from Mirko during my recovery. Aizawa informed me that some kids were there to see me, claiming to know me and presenting proof of their transfer to UA. They were joining class 2A, and one of them was quite young. He wondered why they were speaking only English. I quickly agreed to meet them, excitedly rushing to the entrance. As I arrived, I spotted my friends from America. Kirsten and Kydra looked much the same, while Julia had grown taller and Jack had become more muscular. It had been months since I last saw them. Julia spotted me first, calling my name as she sprinted past Aizawa, tackling me into a hug. We both fell to the ground, and Jack laughed at the sight of me being taken down by someone smaller. Kydra giggled while Kirsten watched, unfazed by the commotion. Julia got off of Izuku, and he sat up, holding his head. At least he wasn't bleeding. Aizawa asked about the newcomers, and Jack burst out laughing, teasing Izuku about his nickname. Izuku explained that they were friends from America who had surprised him with their visit. Kydra apologized for the surprise as she helped him to his feet, and he smiled, acknowledging the unexpected visit. Aizawa confirmed they had enough rooms for everyone and instructed Izuku to take them to the dorms. Jack celebrated with a fist pump, and they walked toward the dorms, chatting and laughing. Julia asked how Izuku had been, and he mentioned a few new scars, rolling up his sleeve to show the one on his forearm. Kydra expressed concern, and Izuku explained it was from an encounter with acid. Jack whistled at the sight and asked about Izuku's classmates. Izuku shared that he had forgiven most of them, although one girl still held a grudge. As they arrived at the 2A dorms, Izuku opened the door to a chaotic scene. Bakugo shouted at Kirishima, who was struggling with pancakes. Todoroki entered the kitchen, grabbing some orange juice, and Bakugo continued to argue with him. When Todoroki noticed Izuku, he greeted him and inquired about the newcomers. Izuku introduced his friends, explaining that they spoke no Japanese. Kydra asked why Bakugo and Kirishima were shouting, and Bakugo approached, demanding to know who the newcomers were. Izuku clarified that they were friends from America. Bakugo questioned their strength, and Izuku shrugged, while Jack tapped him on the shoulder, confused about the conversation. Izuku explained the names of his classmates in English, and Kirsten introduced herself to Todoroki, who asked if Kydra was her sister. Mina appeared, yawning and curious about the newcomers. Izuku introduced her to Kydra, and Mina welcomed them, speaking in both Japanese and English. Kirishima approached Jack, who confirmed he knew Izuku from America. Jack teased Izuku about his nickname, and Izuku warned him against using it. Suddenly, Julia came running out of the hallway, and Izuku caught her before she fell. Mineta rushed out behind her, asking about the new girl. Izuku snapped at him, feeling anger rise when Julia mentioned he had tried to grope her. Fueled by rage, Izuku confronted Mineta, who was bewildered by the situation. Izuku used his quirk to lift Mineta off the ground and asked Bakugo if he wanted to help launch Mineta into space. Bakugo eagerly agreed, and they prepared for the unusual plan. Aizawa approached, questioning their intentions. Izuku explained their plan, but Aizawa sighed, expressing his disapproval. Reluctantly, Izuku retracted his quirk, but just then he was unexpectedly struck in the chest and sent flying back. He landed a distance away, where he was greeted by Mirko, who was smiling and asking if he was ready for training. Izuku protested, reminding her that her actions could have hurt him. Mirko shrugged off his concern, insisting he needed to improve his spatial awareness as she helped him up. "Again, you kicking me probably isn't the best way to do that," he replied, and she waved her hand dismissively, as if the question was silly. "I think it is, and that's what matters. Besides, did you forget who the dominant one in this relationship is?" Roomie asked, causing him to sputter slightly. "Who decided you were the dominant one?" he questioned, hearing Bakugo laughing behind him. "Remember after your training was done? I tackled you and ended up on top," Roomie reminded him, and he sighed. "I do remember, but we weren't even dating yet. You can't claim dominance just because you tackled me unexpectedly and ended up on top," he argued, and Roomie laughed. "You also didn't do anything to make me move when I had my foot on your chest," Roomie noted, and he sighed again. "I couldn't breathe well, plus moving you would have likely caused you to fall on top of me, which would have been more trouble than it was worth," he replied, and Roomie smirked slightly. "You're telling me you wouldn't have liked it?" she teased. "Not saying that, just saying it's not really worth the trouble," he said, and she sighed, shaking her hand. Izuku, who is this?" Jack asked, walking toward him with Kydra, Kirsten, and Julia right behind. "This is Roomie Usajiyama, also known as the pro-hero Mirko." "Shizel he began, but was cut off by Kydra running up to Roomie. "You're Mirko? No way. You're really popular back in the States," Kydra exclaimed, and Roomie gave him a confused look. "They're American," he explained in Japanese, and she slowly nodded. "I am? I didn't know that. Where in America are you guys from?" she asked, and she and Kydra began to chat, while Jack approached him. "She's really cute, huh?" Jack muttered, and he chuckled. "Well, she is my girlfriend, so I am aware of that," he replied quietly, and Jack looked at him in shock. You're dating a pro hero? He asked, and he nodded. Long story involving several villains, me kicking her multiple times, a party, and her tackling me at least once, he explained, and Jack shook his head. How do you do it, man? How do you get so many girls to fall for you? I know Kydra has a crush on you, and I'm like 90% sure that Julia does as well, Jack sighed, then shot a glance at Kirsten. I don't know, man. By the way, if you're going to ask out Kirsten, I know a few good authentic ramen places, he suggested, and Jack looked at him in shock. Don't say stuff like that. I don't like her, he replied in a hushed tone. Yes, you do. It's obvious. Don't deny it, he countered as Kirsten walked over. What are you two talking about? She asked, and he smirked. Who Jack Lee Dash, he began, but Jack quickly covered his mouth. What was that? Kirsten asked, as he tried to pull Jack's hand off. Nothing. Don't worry about it, Jack said, and Kirsten shrugged, then walked off to talk to Kydra, Roomie, and Julia. After she left, he pulled Jack's hand off his mouth. Pee-pee, he said, and Jack sighed. Tell me something I don't know, Jack replied, and he smirked. So, are you dating anyone? Julia asked Mirko, and she chuckled. I am, as a matter of fact, she said, and he took that as his cue to walk over. Really? I didn't see anything about that in the news, Kydra asked, and Mirko smiled as he came up and put an arm around her shoulder. Well, we wanted to keep it under wraps, at least as much as possible, he replied, and Kydra frowned. Wait, what do you mean, we? She asked, and Roomie smiled. Well, I'm dating this green idiot, she said, and he sighed. I'm not an idiot. Green yes, an idiot no, he said, and Roomie laughed, then gave him a kiss on the cheek. You are an idiot. You get injured more than a pro boxer, Roomie teased, and he scoffed. That's unfair, he said, when suddenly an alarm began to blare. He recognized it immediately. Level 3 security breach. All students and faculty, please evacuate. I repeat, Level 3 security breach. All students and faculty, please evacuate, a robotic voice announced, and he snarled. Is it the press again? Bakugo asked, looking toward the gate. Hard to say, he replied, and then he saw something running toward them. A large, dark figure. Eninu! Mirko shouted, leaping at the creature. He was a split second behind her, activating his powers. Mirko reached the Nomu first, wrapping her legs around its neck, twisting her body, and swiftly dispatching it. He grabbed the body and threw it into the air, where Bakugo unleashed a powerful explosion, neutralizing it. Mirko crushed the head, ensuring it was no longer a threat, which Bakugo incinerated with another explosion. Todoroki ran out, followed by Kirishima and Mina. What the hell is going on? And what was that thing? Jack asked, as he looked toward the direction where the Nomu had come from. That was a Nomu, a genetically engineered villain. They take people and turn them into those things, he explained, as he heard a loud cheer echo throughout the courtyard. The League of Villains is back again? They've gotten bolder, huh? Mirko said, and he sighed. So it seems. Bakugo, Todoroki, Kirishima, are you ready for this? He asked, and he heard grunts of confirmation. Izuku, let us help, Kirsten shouted, running up to him. Yeah, come on, man. You're going to need all the help you can get, Jack said, running with a pair of pistols. He decided not to ask about that. Fine. But I'm warning you now. These guys fight hard, and they will take you down if given the chance. Let's go, he shouted, then sprinted toward the chaos. Mirko, Bakugo, and Todoroki were right behind him, with the others a bit further back. When they arrived at the main battle, it was already in full swing. Toga and Twice were working together against Vlad King, who was holding his ground. Dabi and Cementos were locked in combat, blasts of fire and concrete flying between them. Compress was battling Present Mike, while Spinner attacked Midnight, who was mostly dodging. Shigaraki stood in the middle, laughing maniacally, as Nomus roamed around, engaging other teachers and some third-year students. A few first-years were trying to take on a villain with metal teeth, and then he spotted a familiar scarred face. You knocked me out, Muscular shouted, noticing him. Shigaraki looked his way and smiled widely. All Might's successor, everyone. The next symbol of peace. Shigaraki called out mockingly. Toga spotted Izuku and called out to him. Shigaraki, with a smirk, acknowledged Izuku's presence, noting how he hadn't changed much. He expressed curiosity about the others in their group, mentioning Bakugo, Todoroki, and Mirko, before commanding the Nomus to engage, with Muscular following closely behind. Izuku decided to confront Muscular directly, stating he was ready for their rematch. Muscular taunted him, wondering how much stronger he had become since their last encounter. Izuku replied that he had indeed grown stronger and that it was time to fight. He charged at Muscular, using his full cowl to enhance his speed. Muscular dodged the first kick but was caught off guard by Izuku's follow-up axe kick, which sent him reeling. Izuku quickly regained his footing and struck again, delivering a powerful kick to Muscular's sternum that propelled him backward. Muscular laughed, acknowledging Izuku's increased strength, but Izuku was determined not to back down. He activated his black whip, using it like a weapon to create deep gashes in the ground. With newfound confidence, he lashed out at Muscular, severing a portion of his arm, which caused Muscular to grunt in pain. The fight intensified, with Muscular charging at Izuku, who skillfully dodged and continued to slice away at Muscular's exposed muscles, which quickly regenerated. Mirko called out to Izuku, informing him that the Nomus were down. He instructed her to assist the other teachers while he dealt with Muscular. As Bakugo and Todoroki joined the fray, Bakugo launched a powerful explosion at Muscular's face, giving Izuku the opening he needed. He leaped high into the air and executed a powerful move, slamming his leg down onto Muscular's head. The impact created a large crater, knocking Muscular out temporarily. Todoroki expressed disbelief that Izuku had fought Muscular alone. Izuku inquired about his friends, and Todoroki pointed out where they were engaged in battle. Kirishima was occupied with another villain, while Julia and Jack were assisting Midnight. Kydra was helping Cementos, and Kirsten was fighting alongside Vlad King. Mirko was making her way toward Shigaraki, facing two large Nomus. Izuku decided to help Mirko, sprinting into the chaos while dodging blasts of wind and fire. He saw Mirko battling a massive Nomu with blade-like arms and another that spat acid. He warned Mirko to duck and kicked the blade-arm Nomu back. Mirko thanked him and asked about Muscular. Izuku explained that with the combined efforts of Bakugo and Todoroki, they had taken him down. As they dodged more acid, Izuku proposed a plan to Mirko, who enthusiastically agreed. With a swift motion, Izuku grabbed Mirko's leg and spun her around before launching her at the blade-arm Nomu. Mirko struck the Nomu, knocking it off balance. Izuku followed up with his black whip, quickly dispatching the creature. He called for Todoroki, who blasted the remains into ash. Feeling energized, Izuku prepared for round 2. Mirko took the initiative this time, grabbing Izuku's arm and spinning him around before throwing him at the acid-spitting Nomu. They executed the same strategy, and Todoroki finished it off again. Izuku confronted Shigaraki, declaring that it was time to end the fight. Shigaraki acknowledged Izuku's growth but then summoned Kurogiri, causing Mirko and Kydra to vanish. 2 portals opened, and the girls fell from above. Shigaraki seized them, leaving them in a precarious position. He presented Izuku with a choice: save the woman he loved or the girl who had a crush on him. Mirko urged Izuku to save his friend, but Shigaraki tightened his grip, counting down the seconds. As the tension mounted, Izuku remained resolute, glaring at Shigaraki. When the countdown reached 1, Izuku declared that he had made his choice. Shigaraki grinned, intrigued by Izuku's decision. Neither of them. A grin spread across the protagonist's face as Shigaraki shouted, demanding a choice. The protagonist had pondered this dilemma before, imagining a scenario where a villain pointed a weapon at Mirko and another at a civilian. It was impossible to save both, so the protagonist trailed off, contemplating the weight of the decision. Shigaraki's frustration boiled over as he insisted there was no third option. The protagonist calmly asserted that there was a way to deal with the villain. With a swift motion, they unleashed tendrils to restrain Shigaraki's fingers, preventing him from harming Mirko and Kydra. In a burst of action, the protagonist kicked Shigaraki hard in the jaw, sending him flying and releasing his hold on both captives. Kurogiri shouted for a retreat, creating a portal beneath the League of Villains, and they vanished, leaving the battle behind. Bakugo surveyed the devastation, noting the craters and remnants of the Nomu scattered around. Mirko approached the protagonist, visibly shaken but determined, acknowledging the successful plan. The protagonist checked on her, apologizing for the need to move cautiously. Mirko reassured them, complimenting the strategy with a grateful gesture. Jack, observing the moment, teased them about their display of affection, prompting a light-hearted banter as they walked back to the dorms, discussing trivial matters. A week later, Jack inquired about the budding relationship between the protagonist and Mirko, but the protagonist was reluctant to share details again. Jack persisted, seeking advice for his own romantic interests, but the protagonist playfully deflected his requests. Their exchange was filled with friendly jabs and laughter, but the atmosphere shifted when the protagonist received a concerning message from Roomie. Realizing the urgency, the protagonist quickly prepared to leave, grabbing their riding jacket and helmet. Jack, sensing the tension, asked what was happening. The protagonist explained that Roomie needed them, their voice thick with emotion. Yaoyorozu, the class vice president, expressed concern but ultimately agreed to relay the message to Aizawa. Aizawa appeared, acknowledging the situation and imposing a unique punishment. The protagonist could not return until Roomie was cheered up. Shocked but determined, the protagonist accepted the challenge and rushed outside, adrenaline surging as they mounted their motorcycle and sped through the streets of Tokyo. Arriving at Roomie's apartment, the protagonist was met with an emotional embrace. Roomie, visibly distressed, clung to them, her vulnerability evident. The protagonist wrapped their arms around her, offering comfort and support. Roomie struggled to find her words, trembling in the protagonist's embrace. The protagonist reassured her, ready to listen or simply be present. They could see the fear in her eyes, and their heart ached for her as she fought to express herself. She asked if he could just hold her, and he smiled, nodding slowly. They stood there for a few minutes, him holding her tightly, her arms wrapped around his neck, her head resting on his shoulder. After a while, Roomie wondered if Aizawa would be angry with him. They had somehow ended up in her room, though he wasn't quite sure how. He replied that Aizawa would be upset if he returned without her feeling better, which made her chuckle lightly. She lifted her head and looked up at him again, apologizing for calling so late and trailing off. He reassured her, saying that he had faced danger because someone had hurt her. He would go to great lengths to protect her and would confront anyone who stood in his way. She nodded, acknowledging his words but expressing frustration at her own feelings. She felt it was stupid to be like this, a pro who should be strong and not waking up screaming from nightmares. He reminded her that everyone has fears and cries sometimes. She sighed, admitting that she couldn't stop dreaming about what had happened. The memory of that man's face haunted her, and she felt overwhelmed by her emotions. In a moment of anger, she pushed him away and slammed her foot on the floor, cracking it. He felt his heart ache for her as she expressed her torment, reliving the same nightmare every night. Tears streamed down her face as she sat on her bed, crying. He approached her, sitting down and pulling her into a comforting embrace, holding her close. He shared a personal story, revealing that he had experienced trauma himself. He had been involved in a dangerous incident where lives were at stake, and it had left him with lingering nightmares. He described the pain of trauma, comparing it to an anchor or broken glass, a scar that takes time to heal. He encouraged her to live her life freely and not let her past dictate her future. Roomie stuttered, struggling to find her words. He gently turned her face toward his, reminding her of her strength and resilience. He expressed his love for her, urging her not to give up. She smiled, grateful for his support. He assured her that he would always be there for her, and they shared a tender kiss. As they embraced, the atmosphere shifted, and they found themselves caught up in the moment, their feelings for each other intensifying. The next morning, he woke up in a bed that wasn't his own. Groaning slightly, he looked around the spacious apartment and realized he was not alone. Roomie lay sleeping on his chest, her bare back rising and falling with her breath. He quickly noticed that they were both without clothes, and their garments were scattered around the room. It didn't take long for him to piece together what had happened the night before. Spotting a clock on her nightstand, he saw that it was already 9. He felt a pang of anxiety, knowing Aizawa might be upset with him. Deciding to let it go for now, he relaxed under the warm sunlight streaming in. He absent-mindedly rubbed small circles on Roomie's back, tracing the scars he felt beneath his fingers. She had endured a lot, and he knew that training at UA and working as a pro could be incredibly tough. With a sigh, he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. Over the next week, the protagonist and Mirko do not speak. It feels too awkward. Kirishima apologizes repeatedly, but the protagonist brushes him off, insisting it's fine. One day, while walking through Tokyo to clear his mind, he hears a commotion in an alley. He shouts as he approaches, spotting a man in dark clothing looming over something. He runs forward, demanding to know what the man is doing. As he gets closer, the man hastily adjusts his clothing and attempts to flee. The protagonist manages to catch him, but the man pulls out a taser and jabs it into his ribs. The protagonist collapses, unable to move anything below his neck. The man taunts him, revealing his identity as someone the protagonist recognizes from the lobby. Anger wells up inside him as he realizes the situation is far worse than he imagined. He sees Mirko's hero uniform, torn and damaged, and his fury intensifies. He vows to find the man and make him regret his actions, but the man merely laughs and walks away, leaving the protagonist feeling helpless and in tears. After some time, Roomie begins to stir and eventually wakes up, blinking sleepily before smiling at the protagonist with a hint of shyness. She acknowledges the events of the previous night, and he responds with a smirk, kissing her forehead. They share a moment, discussing their scars and experiences, with Roomie commenting on how she never realized he had so many. They exchange playful banter, and he teases her about her brother, which makes her laugh. As they talk, Roomie notices the time and realizes they have slept for a while. The protagonist acknowledges that they must get back to their respective responsibilities. He stretches and prepares to leave, joking about being lectured by a certain pro hero. Roomie playfully retorts, and they continue to tease each other. She gestures to her legs, indicating her exhaustion, and he notes that he should be going. Before he leaves, he kisses her forehead and they discuss the importance of being cautious in the future, which leads to a light-hearted moment. After saying goodbye, he heads down to the ground floor, makes his way back to UA, changes, and enters the classroom. He finds Midnight engaging with the class, and she immediately notices his arrival, asking where he had been. He explains that he spent the night at Mirko's place because she needed someone to talk to. Midnight inquires about their relationship status, and he confirms they are dating. Jack points out hickeys on his neck, prompting the protagonist to wince as he touches a tender spot. He admits they may have done more than just talk, which raises eyebrows among his classmates. As the lesson shifts to a more sensitive topic, Midnight asks the class a question about anatomy. The protagonist reluctantly raises his hand, answering correctly, and the lesson continues. That class was intense, Jack groaned. As they settled down for lunch with Bakugo, Todoroki, Kirishima, and Kaminari. Tell me about it, Midoriya sighed, cracking his neck. So, what did you do last night? Kaminari asked, a playful smirk on his face. Nothing you need to worry about. We talked and fell asleep on her couch, Midoriya replied, and Kaminari raised an eyebrow. Those marks on your neck suggest otherwise, Kaminari said, tapping the base of Midoriya's neck. Okay, maybe we kissed. What's it to you? Midoriya shot back, and Kaminari smirked wider. Oh, nothing. If that's all you did, Kaminari teased. Kaminari, get your mind out of the gutter, Bakugo snapped, pointing at him. Hey, I'm just saying. He got to class late, had messy hair, and those marks. Plus, he spent from at least 11 o'clock until 9:30 at Mirko's place. That's a long time, Kaminari continued. I doubt Midoriya would be involved in anything like that at such a young age. Right, Midoriya? Iida asked as he joined them. Midoriya remained silent, taking another bite of his katsudon. Wait, don't tell me, Iida whispered, and his friends looked at him expectantly. Sighing, Midoriya loosened his collar slightly, pulled off his tie, and unbuttoned the top button of his shirt, revealing some of the marks on his shoulder and chest. "Holy!" Jack said, trailing off as Midoriya buttoned up his shirt again. "You tell no one. I mean no one. Got it? Promise me you won't tell a single soul," Midoriya insisted, looking at each of them in turn. They all nodded. "Well, that's the answer to Iida's question. I was involved last night," Midoriya admitted, and Kaminari's jaw dropped. "Well, I did not expect that," Bakugo said, leaning back in his chair. "What does that mean?" Midoriya asked, and Bakugo scoffed. "You were timid before you got back. Now you're more confident," Bakugo said, chuckling a bit. "Wait, did you lose your V-card?" Kaminari asked, and Midoriya sighed before nodding. "Well then, you are now a true man," Kaminari said, bowing his head in mock seriousness. "Midoriya, please tell me you were careful," Iida said, concern evident in his voice. Midoriya thought back to the previous night. "Kinda," he replied, and Iida sighed heavily. "If you got her P-Argent, you know you would jeopardize both your futures, right?" Iida warned, and Midoriya nodded. "She said she was on the pill and would take a morning after pill. Not that I would mind having a child with her, but it's a bit early," Midoriya explained, and Iida sighed again. "As long as you understand the implications," he said. Todoroki then spoke up. "Is that why you seem to know so much today, particularly about the female body?" he asked, and Midoriya rubbed the back of his head. "Maybe," he muttered. "So, what was it like?" Kaminari asked, and Midoriya shot him a glare. "I'm not sharing details, dude. Just wondering how it was," Kaminari clarified, and Midoriya sighed, which quickly turned into a groan. "It was amazing, for lack of a better term." "I'm not telling you anything more," he said, diving back into his katsudon. They had no idea. It was beyond amazing. Young Midoriya, All Might said, approaching him after class ended. Midoriya had planned to go to lunch, but he sensed this was important. "Yes," he replied. "We need to talk," All Might said, his tone serious. "About what?" Midoriya asked. "Something concerning your powers," All Might explained, and Midoriya nodded. "We can go now," he said, and All Might nodded solemnly. They walked into the conference room and sat down, looking at each other. "So, what is this about?" Midoriya asked, and All Might sighed. "All for One wants to talk with you," he said, and Midoriya raised an eyebrow. "Why would he want to talk to me?" Midoriya inquired. "He said he had something to tell you that he wouldn't share with anyone else. He warned that if this secret got out, he would break free and harm anyone who heard it," All Might explained, and Midoriya narrowed his eyes. "I thought that wasn't possible," he said. "It shouldn't be. But he may have the power to escape. He's incredibly powerful, as you know. I doubt anyone fully understands his abilities. He claims that if he talks to you, he won't attempt to break out," All Might said, and Midoriya sighed. "We can go after school," he agreed, and All Might raised an eyebrow. "I would have thought you would refuse," All Might noted. "Normally I would. But my own power is confusing me. If he has anything that can help, I'm willing to listen," Midoriya said, clenching his fists. "All right. Stay after school, and we'll drive," All Might instructed, and Midoriya nodded. "Now, I need to get to lunch," he said, bowing to All Might before leaving. All for One's voice was hoarse and tired as he acknowledged the presence of his visitor. The atmosphere was tense as the young hero sat across from him, eyes narrowed in suspicion. He had come to hear what the notorious villain had to say. All for One revealed that the secret he held was twofold, beginning with the young hero's newest quirk. The hero's curiosity piqued. He questioned how All for One knew about it. The villain explained that some guards were not as discreet as they believed, and he shared that the quirk was not merely a quirk but rather a unique power. The hero pressed for clarification, and All for One chuckled darkly as he recounted the story of Tatsumi, the original wielder of that power. He described the fierce battle he had fought against Tatsumi, who had resisted him fiercely. Despite his efforts, All for One had been unable to take the quirk, and Tatsumi had escaped, only to confront him again. This time, All for One had emerged victorious, but not without sustaining a scar from the encounter. The young hero found the tale absurd, muttering under his breath about the villain's sanity. All for One, however, maintained that his views were simply different from those of society. He was about to continue when the hero interrupted, wanting to ask about Shigaraki. He inquired about Shigaraki's powerful and deadly quirk, questioning if he was All for One's son. All for One responded with a chuckle, explaining that Shigaraki was a sensitive subject for the hero's mentor, Nana Shimura, the seventh user of One for All. He hinted at a connection between Shigaraki and Shimura, leading the hero to piece together the familial ties. While All for One clarified that Shigaraki was not his son, he admitted to having one child of his own, who was still alive and young. The hero pressed for more information, but All for One turned the tables, asking about Hisashi Midoriya, the hero's father. The young hero's demeanor shifted to anger as he demanded to know how All for One knew his father's name. All for One explained that he made it his business to know everything about the holders of One for All. The young hero revealed that he knew little about his father, only what his mother had told him, and that Hisashi had left when he was 4. All for One shared a personal story about his life after defeating Shimura, describing a chance encounter with a kind woman who became his wife and the mother of his child. He recounted the joy of their life together until All Might's return forced him to leave to protect them from danger. The young hero's heart sank as he asked for the woman's name, and All for One revealed it was Inko Yanazuki, now Inko Midoriya. The revelation hit the hero hard, leaving him in disbelief. All for One confirmed the truth. The young hero was his biological son, a fact he had never been able to admit. The hero struggled with the revelation, expressing his anger and disbelief. All for One acknowledged the pain of leaving his family behind, admitting that it was the hardest decision he had ever made. He expressed pride in his son, recognizing the strength and potential within him. The young hero, overwhelmed, sat back in his chair, questioning whether his mother knew the truth. All for One shook his head, revealing that he had never shared his true identity with Inko. When the hero questioned why he would tell him, All for One simply stated that he believed his son deserved to know his origins. He spoke about family, and she felt a growl rise within her. She declared that he was not her family, that he had abandoned her and her mother. He attempted to justify his actions, claiming it was for her own good, but she interrupted him, her voice filled with anger. She accused him of acting out of self-interest, leaving them to save himself. In a moment of desperation, he shouted that he had acted out of fear, straining against his restraints. She paused, taken aback by his admission. He explained that he had left because he feared the truth would shatter both her and her mother. He had wanted to forget All Might, the hero he despised, and live a normal life, but he knew that staying would only bring danger to them. He had chosen to leave to protect them from the horrors that could follow. Silence enveloped her as she processed his words. She resolved to erase any record of their conversation, ensuring that even All Might would not hear it. Standing up, she turned her back on him. He called her name softly, but she remained resolute, asking what he wanted. He urged her to become a hero, suggesting that perhaps one day she could acknowledge their connection, but not yet. He expressed a desire to tell her mother in the future. She replied that maybe, in time, she would consider it. As she exited the room, All Might awaited her outside. He inquired about the conversation, but she shook her head, unable to share the details. His shock was evident as he pressed for an explanation. She insisted that the secret would remain with her, taking it to her grave. She needed to act quickly and asked for the location of the monitoring room. All Might pointed her in the right direction. Entering the room, she noticed the technician looking at her with apprehension. She demanded that he delete all the tapes, her voice sharp and commanding. The technician nodded, hastily erasing the files from the last half hour. She warned him that if he disclosed anything to anyone, including his superiors, he would not return home to his family. He nodded in understanding, fear evident in his eyes. I walked into the dorms, feeling numb. What I had just learned was overwhelming. I was the son of the most powerful villain. It felt like a cruel joke. Here I was, trying to become a hero, and yet I was the child of a notorious villain. Not just any villain, but the villain. And I couldn't even confide in anyone about it. All Might was out of the question, and I certainly couldn't tell my classmates or my mother. Maybe Mirko? but I wasn't sure how she would react. Kirishima approached me, looking a bit frazzled, his hair in disarray and red marks visible on his neck. He asked what the villain wanted to tell me, and I glanced at him, trying to shake off the weight of my thoughts. I told him it was nothing significant, just the ramblings of an insane man. I added that Shigaraki wasn't related to him, so we likely didn't have to worry about him suddenly wielding multiple quirks. Kirishima gave me a puzzled look. He seemed concerned and asked if I was okay. I assured him I was fine, just a bit tired and annoyed that my time had been wasted. I cracked my neck, trying to shake off the tension. Kirishima inquired about everyone else, and I learned they had gone to the pool while he and Mina stayed back. I teased him about the marks on his neck, and he reacted with embarrassment. After a moment of banter, I opened my door and closed it slowly, fighting the urge to slam it. I sat on my bed, burying my head in my hands. Frustration boiled over, and I stood up to punch the wall, feeling it shake slightly from the impact. I shouted in frustration, then slammed my head against the wall harder than I intended. The pain throbbed as I sank to the floor. Suddenly, Roomie's voice called from my balcony. I opened the sliding door to let her in. She commented on the cold and expressed her boredom, then noticed my expression and asked if I was okay. I told her I was just tired. She challenged my honesty, and I jokingly called her bluff. But when she insisted she was calling mine, I finally admitted that I wasn't fine at all. Roomie offered to talk about it, and I hesitated. I knew her well enough to trust her with my secret. I brought up the Kamino Ward fight, and she recalled it vividly, recognizing it as the day All Might's hero career ended. I explained that the villain he fought, All for One, had been alive since the beginning of quirks and had the ability to take and use other quirks. I revealed that this man claimed to be my father, my voice breaking as I spoke. Roomie was taken aback, processing the revelation. I explained how All for One knew personal details about me that no one else could unless they were close to me. I felt anger and tension as I shared this information. Roomie summarized the situation, and I confirmed that was indeed the case. She asked if my mother knew, and I shook my head. Only a few people were aware of my lineage. Roomie, a security guard I had threatened to keep quiet, and of course, All for One. When she asked if All Might knew, I laughed bitterly, imagining his reaction if I told him I was the son of his greatest enemy. Roomie insisted that All Might would help me, but I reminded her of the history between All Might and All for One, how the latter had caused immense pain and suffering. Roomie pointed out that despite All Might's past, he cared for me and my classmates. He had retired because he could no longer protect Japan, passing the mantle to someone more capable. I sighed, feeling the weight of my revelation. My world had been turned upside down. I had thought my father was just a deadbeat, not a supervillain entangled in a blood feud. Roomie's ears perked up as she asked about the blood feud. I hesitated, then revealed that I had been born quirkless, which shocked her. But she mentioned having a quirk, which made him sigh. He explained that he was born without a quirk, with 2 joints in his pinky and everything. After the sludge villain incident, All Might chose his successor, and after 10 months of training he passed on his quirk, One for All. Roomie's jaw dropped in surprise. During the entrance exam, he had literally broken his right arm and both legs. One for All was an incredibly powerful quirk, a power crystallization ability. He was the 9th user of this quirk, the 9th inheritor. In addition to the power enhancement, he had unlocked 7 other quirks from the first 7 users. All Might had also been quirkless, like him, but he had managed to unlock 3 quirks: Black Whip, which he had used to defeat the Nomus, Float, which was straightforward, and finally, a dragon-like quirk whose name he did not yet know. He still had 4 quirks left to unlock. Roomie was astonished, realizing he could potentially have 8 quirks. He acknowledged this, feeling like a chimera of a hero. Roomie then asked how One for All and All for One were connected, to which he sighed and explained that the original holder of One for All was All for One's brother. All for One had given his brother a strength enhancement quirk that fused with his own, allowing him to pass down quirks, which became One for All. Roomie asked if the holders of One for All had been fighting All for One since quirks began. He confirmed this, noting that every user except All Might had been killed in battle against him. Roomie then inquired if the fight was over, and he shrugged, explaining that Shigaraki was kind of a successor, carrying on All for One's will. While he didn't possess All for One, he was dangerous in his own right, insane yet smart, and highly prone to unpredictable outbursts. They both realized they had their work cut out for them. Roomie kissed him on the cheek as he put his arm around her shoulders, and he returned the gesture by kissing the top of her head. Just then, Kirishima knocked on the door, causing him to jump slightly. He told Kirishima to wait a moment as he stood up. Roomie moved toward the balcony door, but he wrapped his arm around her waist to stop her. He suggested she could stay, but she blushed and expressed her reluctance to deal with his classmates, finding it embarrassing. He teased her about being the great Mirko, embarrassed. When he opened the door, Kirishima was surprised to see Roomie there. She greeted him, and he asked what she was doing there. He explained that she had come to visit him and reminded Kirishima that he was lucky to see his girlfriend anytime, unlike them who had to sneak around. Kirishima was at a loss for words, and when he asked how he would explain this to Aizawa, he insisted it was Roomie's fault, not his. Roomie playfully punched his shoulder, and he chuckled in response. Just then, Ishido appeared, asking Roomie why she hadn't shared this news. Roomie was taken aback, and Ishido pressed for details about their relationship. He interjected, explaining that their moment had just happened when he went to comfort her, and hormones had played a role. Ishido insisted that Roomie come with her, grabbing her wrist. Roomie protested, calling for his help as she was pulled away, and he shrugged, believing Roomie could handle Ishido. Kirishima warned him not to blame him if things went poorly. He reassured Kirishima that as long as Ishido didn't cause too much trouble, he could manage the situation. Kirishima remarked on his craziness, and he chuckled, acknowledging the truth in that statement as he heard loud, happy squealing in the distance. Some secrets you can tell. Mineta burst into the dorm, calling out for Midoriya, startling him and causing him to nearly spill his drink. The rest of the class followed, their expressions a mix of bemusement, amusement, and horror. Mineta approached Midoriya, his excitement palpable. He demanded to know what had happened, revealing that he had overheard Jiro and Kaminari discussing a significant event in Midoriya's life. Midoriya sighed, acknowledging the truth of Mineta's claim but refusing to share details. Kaminari, apologetic, explained how the information had come to light, and Midoriya expressed concern for Roomie, hoping she could withstand the barrage of questions from Mina and the other girls. Kaminari, with a nervous chuckle, made a gesture of good luck, which amused Midoriya. They exchanged thoughts about their families and beliefs, with Kaminari admitting that his parents were more devout than he was. As Kirishima entered, Mineta wasted no time in announcing Midoriya's news, prompting Kirishima to react with surprise. Yaoyorozu then stepped forward, her expression serious as she inquired about Midoriya's choices. Midoriya shrugged, explaining that Roomie was on the pill, and he would accept responsibility if necessary, even if it meant raising a child. Mineta, still in disbelief, shouted about losing his own virginity, while the others began to tease him about their own experiences. Midoriya pointed out that Kirishima had made out with Mina, which led to a playful exchange among the group. Bakugo smirked, and the conversation turned to Kaminari's feelings for Kyoka, leading to a humorous moment when Roomie suddenly tackled Midoriya, expressing her distress over Mina's relentless questioning. As the chaos unfolded, Roomie revealed that Mina was seeking details about Midoriya's experience. Midoriya, amused, teased Roomie about her fears. Roomie blushed as she explained that Mina was curious about how it felt, wanting to know for herself. Midoriya couldn't resist the urge to stir the pot, calling out to Kirishima to assist Roomie, which only added to Mina's embarrassment. The situation escalated as Bakugo and Todoroki were called upon to help, leading to unexpected outcomes. Bakugo returned carrying a flustered Uraraka, and Todoroki announced his intention to find Yaoyorozu, leaving Midoriya and Roomie in a state of disbelief. Mineta, ever the instigator, confronted Roomie about her relationship with Midoriya, leading her to explain her feelings. She expressed her love for him, recounting how he had fought for her and supported her through tough times. Midoriya felt a warm sensation in his chest as he listened to her heartfelt words, realizing the depth of their connection. A smile crept onto my face almost unconsciously as she leaned against me. Mineta commented that it was a silly reason, prompting a laugh from me. I teased him about his lack of luck with girlfriends, which made Roomie chuckle before she planted a quick kiss on my cheek. She mentioned needing to get to work and started toward the door, only to be met with Aizawa's bemused gaze. He inquired about her presence, and she crossed her arms defiantly, stating she had come to see her boyfriend. Aizawa raised an eyebrow and glanced at me. I shrugged and clarified that I had simply let her in. Aizawa then remarked that as long as we weren't engaging in any inappropriate activities in the dorms, he didn't mind. Roomie flashed a playful smile and jokingly responded that she made no promises before leaping away. Aizawa turned to me, asking if I had taught her that behavior. I assured him I hadn't. He reminded me about the cameras in the dorm, and I confidently told him to check them, insisting nothing inappropriate had happened, at least not in that moment. He muttered that as long as I hadn't gotten her P-Argin and tea, it was fine by him. I decided it was time for a nap and made my way to my room. As I passed Bakugo's room, I heard some unusual sounds but chose to ignore them. I entered my room, lay back on my bed, and let sleep take over. Kirishima looked at Midoriya with concern as he settled into his seat. He asked what All Might wanted, and Midoriya replied that All for One wanted to have a conversation. The table fell silent, everyone shocked by the mention of the notorious villain. Bakugo's voice dropped to a low hiss as he questioned whether Midoriya had really said All for One. Midoriya confirmed it, and Bakugo growled, memories of past encounters flooding back. Jack, curious, asked who All for One was, prompting a sigh from Midoriya. He explained that All for One was the villain from the Kamino Ward incident, the one All Might had fought in the end. Jack's expression shifted to disbelief as he realized the implications. He asked if Midoriya had agreed to meet, to which Midoriya nodded, revealing that All Might had said the villain had a secret to share. Kirishima, confused, inquired about the nature of the secret, but Midoriya shook his head, admitting he had no idea. He added that All for One had threatened All Might, promising to harm anyone who heard the secret if it was revealed. Bakugo remarked on the absurdity of Midoriya meeting the man who had once tried to kill his mentor, and Midoriya could only mutter in agreement, his mind racing with thoughts of what the villain could possibly want. Dealing with such a dangerous figure was never easy. Later, Midoriya woke up to the darkness of his room, groaning as he checked the time on his phone. It was 10:22, and he lamented his disrupted sleep schedule. After getting out of bed, he made his way downstairs, stretching as he walked. He entered the kitchen, grabbed a packet of instant ramen, and placed it in the microwave. As he waited for it to cook, he became engrossed in his phone, almost missing the dark shape approaching him. Keeping his focus on the screen, he extended a tendril of black whip toward the figure as they drew closer. They lunged at him, and he quickly ensnared them, executing a swift maneuver that pinned them face down on the ground. Midoriya demanded answers, pulling off the intruder's ski mask to reveal a young woman with striking red hair and piercing silver eyes. She refused to speak to him, claiming he sympathized with the enemy. Midoriya pressed her for details, twisting her arms slightly to emphasize his seriousness. She spoke of mutants, labeling them as a plague on the world, which ignited a spark of anger within him. Ignoring her prejudiced remarks, Midoriya asked what she wanted. She smirked, declaring her intent to eliminate all mutants. Midoriya clenched his fist, feeling the tension rise. He pressed her further, stating that she had threatened his classmates and girlfriend, making it clear he would not hesitate to hurt her if necessary. As he tightened his grip, she stubbornly refused to break, claiming she would not divulge her mission. Eventually, she revealed that she had been sent to eliminate him and 2 of his classmates. When he pressed her for her employer, she claimed to be a member of the Anti-Mutant League, a shadowy organization he had never heard of. She laughed darkly, boasting about their elusive nature. Midoriya, frustrated, hoisted her to her feet, but before he could react further, he heard a crunch followed by a beeping sound. The woman spoke ominously about purity, and in an instant, her head erupted in a violent explosion, leaving Midoriya stunned and covered in remnants. In shock, he dropped her body to the ground. Kirishima rushed into the common room, horrified by the scene before him. Midoriya knew they needed help and called for Aizawa, Nizu, and a detective, realizing they were facing a new, dangerous enemy. Tokoyami entered, questioning whether Midoriya had killed her, but he shook his head, explaining that she had taken her own life using an explosive device hidden in her jaw. She had come to kill him, Tokoyami, and Tsuyu. Bakugo approached the body, incredulous that she would rather die than be interrogated. Midoriya nodded, contemplating the grim reality of their situation. My main question is how many more people like this are out there? How large is this new enemy? Then she blew herself up? Tsukachi asks for what seems like the 5th time. I am sitting outside of Heights Alliance, well past midnight. For some reason, I have been wrapped in a shock blanket. Now, I am being urged to take it off, as they fear I might have a breakdown. Technically, just her head, but yes, I reply, finally tossing the blanket aside and watching it land on the grass 30 feet away. You said she claimed to be part of the Anti-Mutant League, correct? Tsukachi inquires and I nod. Yeah. From what? I gathered before she went all out, she claimed that they worked from the shadows, never seen, never caught, or something like that. From what I can piece together, her organization is fanatical, insane, and likely quite large. They want to eliminate those with mutation quirks and anyone who supports them. She was sent to kill me, Tsuyu Azui, and Fumikage Tokoyami. Had I not been awake, she might have succeeded. I glance at Azui, who is being comforted by Tokoyami. She stares at the ground, appearing in shock. She was the first to witness the aftermath, and she nearly lost her composure. To be fair, so did Kaminari, Koda, Sato, and Mineta because it's Mineta. Did she give any indication as to who the organization's targets were? Tsukachi asks and I sigh. Outside of me, Tsuyu, Tokoyami, and Mirko. This is bad. I curse under my breath and pull out my phone. I quickly scroll through my texts, all from Mirko. She's asking if I am okay. I type back, everything's fine on my end, explain later, then turn to Tsukachi. Before she took such drastic measures, her last words were, to purity. To me, it sounds like they are trying to eliminate anyone with a mutation quirk, no matter how minor. That would be millions of people. I say, and he nods in agreement. You're right. I'll have some officers look around and see if they can find anything, he says before standing up and walking away. I look over at Tokoyami and motion for him to come closer. He nods, glancing at Yayorozu before standing up and joining me. We move to the side of the building, away from the chaos. How's Tsu? I ask, and the raven-haired boy shakes his head. She doesn't know why that woman was here. I can't bring myself to tell her, he admits, and I nod in understanding. That's more than fair. How are you? I inquire and he lets out a sigh. Blood and death do not disturb me, but the fact that woman was trying to kill both of us and Tsuyu is what truly troubles me, he replies, and I nod in agreement. She was willing to sacrifice herself just to avoid capture. They don't care about their own safety. That's what worries me, I say. Why did you really bring me here? He asks, and I have a brief flashback to Todoroki during the sports festival. I shake the memory away. Look, you and Tsuyu are in serious danger. Honestly, I should be telling you to run far away, but I know both of you well enough to know you would never run if you could help it, I explain, and the raven-haired boy glares at me. Do you think so low of me that I would ever run? He retorts, and I shake my head. No. You are probably the 3rd or 4th most powerful kid in the 2nd year. I mean that. You and Kirishima keep switching places in my mind, I say. You don't think any of our fellow hero students measure up to us, Achen? He asks. I don't know enough. Honestly, I think the only kid who could hold their own against me, Todoroki, or Bakugo would be Tetsu. Maybe Kendo. That girl can really hold her own, I respond, and Tokoyami nods. Very true. So is that all? He asks, and I ponder for a moment. One more thing. If you ever need backup, I'm always around. If you need another set of fists, just get my attention, I say, placing my hand on his shoulder. He nods and I nod back. He walks back to the main area, and I take a moment to look around. You know, if you're trying to hide, it's not working too well, I say, glancing into the woods. A chuckle emerges from within, and a well-built, well-dressed man steps out. He wears a black suit coat over a dark red dress shirt, a black and red striped tie, black pants, and dark red leather shoes. He stands just over 2 inches taller than me, a small smile on his face. His bright red eyes contrast with his silver gray hair, which is clearly natural. "I'm surprised you noticed me. You are everything and more," the man says, looking at me with mild curiosity rather than hostility. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" I demand, raising my fists. The man raises a hand, and an energy wave erupts from his palm, causing my power to fade. "No need to be hasty. I just want to talk after all," he says, and I glare at him but slowly lower my fists. "What did you do to me?" I ask, keeping my stance ready for a fight. "Oh, nothing too special. My quirk allows me to disable quirks for 15 minutes. Enough time for a conversation," he explains, glancing at his watch. "What do you want?" I ask, and he smirks. "Oh, a lot of things. I wanted to talk to you. You're an interesting one. A successor, the son of a man with more blood on his hands than most alive, and a man carrying more pain in his mind and heart than most could bear," he states, narrowing my eyes at him. "That was only one thing," I reply, and he shrugs. "True. The other? I wanted to check on my subordinate. Confirm if she was really dead," he says, and I feel my anger rise. "You're part of the Anti-Mutant League?" I snarl, and he shrugs again. "That I am. I'm not as fanatical as some of my brothers and sisters, but I do believe. You may call me Poacher." He introduces himself with a bow. "You think this is a game?" I ask, furious. No, I don't. It's just a name I've had for a long time. For a time, I was a literal poacher. Lions, rhinos, and that sort of thing. When he moved to more dubious ventures, the name stuck." He shrugged, and the tension in the air was palpable. That certainly made things feel much better. He shrugged again, indifferent to the situation. He was not in the business of making people feel better. Before joining the Anti-Mutant League, he had made many people angry, and he had been quite good at it. The thought of bringing him in crossed my mind. His organization had threatened 2 of my classmates, along with someone close to me. I had a question that would be in his best interest to answer honestly. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "He could do that," he said. "What was the question?" I wanted to know why they were only targeting Tokoyami and Azui. I had other classmates with mutation quirks, so why those 2? He nodded, acknowledging the fairness of my question. A fair question indeed. Mina Ishido, Masahiro Ojiro, Mizo Shoji, and Toro Hagakure were also on their hit list. They had simply wanted to eliminate the 3 of us first, as we were considered the most dangerous. The rage surged within me. They would kill 7 kids for an ideology? I couldn't believe it. All Might had nearly killed All for one twice, all for his ideology, he replied, raising an eyebrow at my outrage. "How did he know about that?" I asked, and he smirked, claiming that the Anti-Mutant League had its sources. But that wasn't important right now. He had one final point to make. He was there to warn me. If I continued to support, protect, and love those with mutation quirks, he and his organization would not back down. They would unleash chaos on me, my classmates, and everyone who stood beside me. "This was my final warning," he said, his tone shifting from jovial to dark and dangerous. I could feel the hairs on my neck stand up from the intensity of his words. If he was trying to threaten me, he would have to try harder. I was a student at UA, training to become a hero, and I had fought for someone with a mutation quirk. If he had his sources, he should know that. If he threatened me, he better have a solid plan. He would need to be prepared to face everyone at UA, including every teacher and student, both hero and otherwise. If he came at us, we would fight back. The embers of One for All surged through my limbs, and my arms began to spark, causing his eyes to widen slightly. "Noted," he said, and prepared to leave. He added a warning not to try to find them, as I never would. With that, he walked into the woods. I shouted for him to come back, running after him. But before I could reach him, he vanished into the ground. "What just happened?" I muttered, hearing footsteps approaching. "There!" Bakugo shouted, looking around in confusion. We needed a sweep of the grounds. Someone had breached security, I said, glancing at the spot where Poacher had disappeared. What? Tsukachi asked, and I sighed. He had made his way in and left about 10 seconds ago. I suspected another quirk user had helped him. He was gone. Who was he? Tokoyami asked. He called himself Poacher and claimed to be part of the Anti-Mutant League. He confirmed my suspicion that Tsuyu, Tokoyami, and I were not the only targets. Shoji, Hagakure, Ojiro, and Ishido were also on their list. I noticed the color drain from Shoji, Ojiro, Hagakure, and Mina's faces. What else did he tell you? Tsukachi asked, pulling out a notepad. He warned that if anyone opposed them or tried to protect mutants, they would unleash chaos on anyone who stood in their way. If anyone tried to mess with Mina, Kirishima growled, he would take action. I had made it clear to Poacher that if he was going to make threats, he needed to back them up. I also told him that if he tried something, he would face the full force of UA. Bakugo laughed, agreeing that he would indeed face consequences. Did he give any other indication about the organization's goals? Tsukachi inquired. No, but I suspected they were more dangerous than I had initially thought. Poacher had been in control during our conversation. His quirk was similar to Aizawa's, but he could disable quirks for 15 minutes if he hit someone with an energy blast. That was why I hadn't attacked him or tried to bring him in. I suspected he had a weapon, and I couldn't risk it. So, we now had to deal with an evil version of Aizawa? Kirishima asked. Yep, I replied. The chaos had begun. Bloodstains, ideals, and rage filled the air as the morning light broke over the 2A dorms. Mina asked what they were going to do about the threat looming over them. The entirety of classes 2A and 2B, including Shinso and his friends, were gathered, tension palpable among them. Kamakiri, a tall and slender boy with pale skin, expressed his frustration. He suggested they fight back against the group hunting them down. Iida countered, insisting they should leave it to the professionals, but Jiroda, usually calm, disagreed, stating that the situation had escalated beyond that. Millions of people were at risk. Kendo, her orange hair tied in a ponytail, urged everyone to calm down, emphasizing that escalating their tempers would not help anyone. Kirishima chimed in, trying to lighten the mood, but Kurwaro, embodying a darker demeanor, lashed out at him, feeling cornered by the situation. Kirishima, attempting to remain composed, defended his position, stating he had much to lose, including friends and family who were mutants. Tsuyu suggested they stop the argument, noting it was spiraling out of control. Bakugo pointed out that the threat extended beyond mutants, implicating anyone who might assist them. Kurwaro protested, feeling it was unfair to be targeted for who he was. Bakugo, frustrated, raised his voice, and Kamakiri joined in, demanding everyone quiet down. The tension reached a peak until one voice cut through the chaos. The speaker stood up, commanding attention and asserting that they could not act without knowing where the threat was. They expressed their own anger and fear, having been a target in the previous night's attack. The danger was real, and they urged everyone to stop arguing about who had more to lose. Kamakiri retorted, questioning what the speaker had to lose, but the response was firm. The speaker emphasized the stakes. Their lives, friendships, and futures were all at risk. They took a moment to breathe, recognizing the weight of the situation. They reminded everyone that they had faced the League before, but this new threat was larger and more organized. Shiozaki asked what they could do, and the speaker advised everyone to stay alert, not to go anywhere alone, and to watch each other's backs. If trouble arose, they should call for help rather than confront it head-on. Tetsu sought clarification on what constituted a situation where they had no choice, and the speaker defined it as instances where civilian lives were at stake. Kurwaro questioned why people harbored such hatred towards mutants, prompting a grim comparison to historical prejudices. The room fell silent, the harsh truth hanging in the air. The speaker, feeling the weight of the moment, decided they needed rest and suggested everyone else do the same before retreating to their room. As they lay back on their bed, staring at the ceiling, they felt the exhaustion wash over them. It was unclear how long they remained there before finally drifting off to sleep. I wake up, gazing out over an endless black plain. This place feels familiar. A voice calls out to me, and I turn to see first, his white hair shimmering slightly as he looks my way. I can't see his face clearly, but I don't need to. It has been a while since we last spoke, and I acknowledge this with a nod. He asks if I am doing well, and I shrug in this metaphysical world, responding that I'm okay. He sighs, having overheard my conversations about the looming threat. He urges me not to let my feelings interfere with my plans, stating that this fight is not something to take personally. I am taken aback by his words. I argue that my fight against All for One was personal, but he shakes his head, insisting that it was for the betterment of the world and that this new war is one I cannot hope to win. Anger rises within me as I assert that my fight is for the same reason. Every inheritor has faced a similar fate, except for two. I refuse to succumb to that fate, and I will not let this go. I fight my own wars. First acknowledges my anger but warns that my personal connections are blinding me. He advises caution, but I retort that he, as All for One's brother, cannot lecture me on personal connections. I refuse to back down, stating that if I did not fight, I would not be a hero. He warns me that continuing on this path may lead to my downfall, but I scoff, confident that I will not rush into a battle I cannot win. I know my limits and do not appreciate his implications. First reminds me that I am not perfect and that my confidence may be misplaced. I chuckle, acknowledging my imperfections as the world around me begins to fade. When I awaken again, I find myself looking at a pair of familiar white ears. Glancing down, I see Mirko, my arms wrapped around her and hers around me. She is still in her hero costume, fast asleep. The clock on my nightstand reads 3:30 p.m. As I look at my girlfriend, threatened by an organization that could wreak havoc, a wave of fear washes over me. I pull her closer, unwilling to let her go. She stirs and mutters my name, looking up at me. I ask when she arrived, and she estimates it was about 7 hours ago. I chuckle, curious about her presence. She mentions she intended to talk to me but fell asleep instead. I assure her that I would have done the same given the chance. She then asks if I am truly okay, and I sigh, explaining that while death does not trouble me, the words of a woman and a man I encountered in the woods have left me unsettled. When I share what the man, known as Poacher, told me, Roomie is silent for a moment before expressing her disbelief. I agree that their intentions are indeed alarming. Roomie adjusts herself and touches her forehead to mine, a gesture I welcome. She inquires about my plans, and I gaze into her deep ruby-red eyes, which glimmer in the light. I express my uncertainty, sharing that my classmates are at odds with one another, and we are all on edge, feeling like sitting ducks. I admit my fears of losing my friends, my classmates, and her, the woman I love. Roomie acknowledges my fears, revealing that she, too, is scared. She adds that I cannot leave her without the chance to meet our child. My heart races at her words, and I ask for clarification. She smiles and tells me she is PR'd, making me a father. I am taken aback, realizing I will be a father at 18. Roomie laughs, noting that her parents will likely react similarly. I joke about needing to invest in a crib and tools, and she smiles in agreement. We both acknowledge the media's potential reaction, and I express my concern about the tabloids discovering her PR'd. Roomie, however, seems unfazed and suggests we show the press something. She pulls out her phone and takes a photo of us, posting it with a caption that I could have been labeled the best father. I remind her that I am not a father yet, and she playfully counters that I am merely a baby daddy for now. I respond that she is my baby mama, and we shift the conversation to how other heroes might react to our news. I speculate that reactions will vary, but ultimately, we can handle it together. As I lean my forehead against hers, I feel a sense of reassurance. We can face whatever comes our way, united. Kendo asked if anyone had seen Shishida as Yaoyorozu opened the door. She replied that she hadn't seen him. Kendo looked around the living room at the others, including me, Jiro, and Kaminari. Kaminari shrugged, admitting he had been preoccupied all day, which made me chuckle. I teased him, mentioning Jiro, causing both of them to turn bright red and stutter. Yaoyorozu urged me to stop teasing them, but I found it amusing. Kaminari attempted to retort, bringing up my own situation with Mirko, but I clarified that I was being responsible. It had been a month since Mirko shared her news with me, and during that time, we hadn't heard from the AML. The silence was starting to worry me. Mirko was pleased with the situation, but after much discussion, we decided to keep it private. She was 9 weeks along, and although she was still working as a hero, I managed to convince her to stop after 12 weeks, despite her initial resistance. Morning sickness had already affected her performance. Kendo expressed her concern about Shishida not returning home after saying he would spend the weekend at his house. I glanced at the clock. It was barely 5. When I asked where he lived, Kendo mentioned Akita, noting that it was unusual for him to be late. I recalled that there had been delays on the trains from Akita earlier that day, which could explain his absence. However, Kendo pointed out that he hadn't responded to any texts or calls, not even from Shiozaki. I raised an eyebrow when Kendo revealed that Shishida and Shiozaki were dating, something I had missed during my absence. Just then, Shiozaki arrived, looking panicked. My instincts kicked in, and I stood up, sensing something was wrong. She informed us that Shishida had left 6 hours ago, and my heart sank. Kendo suggested it could be a train issue, but Shiozaki shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She explained that he had called his parents after getting off the train at the UA station 6 hours ago. Without hesitation, I whistled sharply, the sound echoing through the dorm. Kaminari stared at me but quickly got to his feet. Within moments, every boy from Class 2A gathered in the common room. I instructed Shiro, Aizawa, and Ken-sensei to join us, and I called for Tokoyami from Class 2B. We needed to find our missing friend. Bakugo growled, asking who was missing as Shiro opened a window and leaped out, followed closely by Tokoyami. I informed them that it was Juroda Shishida and directed Iida to contact his brother while Todoroki reached out to his father for assistance. The urgency of the situation was palpable. I instructed the rest of the boys to grab their costumes and be ready in 5 minutes. Bakugo asked if I needed him, and I confirmed that I did. Yaoyorozu expressed her confusion about the situation, prompting Bakugo to comment on her unexpected use of language. I explained that we had a system in place for emergencies involving missing brothers, which I had set up through late-night brainstorming sessions. Yaoyorozu was surprised to learn that Jiro was aware of this plan, having stumbled upon one of our meetings. Just then, Aizawa entered through the window, asking about the issue. I informed him about Shishida's disappearance and the efforts to contact the Ingenian and Endeavor agencies. Aizawa seemed skeptical but acknowledged the seriousness of the situation when Kendo confirmed that Shishida would have responded to her by now. Aizawa asked if our costumes were on the way, and I assured him that the boys would be ready in 10 minutes. Bakugo added that he would ensure they were prepared. Aizawa then turned to the girls, asking if they wanted to join, and they all nodded in agreement. Yaoyorozu announced that they would gather the girls as the boys from our class arrived with our costumes. Tokoyami reported that the boys from Class 2B were mobilizing enthusiastically. As we changed into our costumes, I quickly summarized the situation, going over the limited details we had. A plan was set in motion to gather information about Shishida. The leader decided that 2 or 3 members from Class 2B would visit Shishida's parents to see if they could uncover any useful details. 8 others would search the area around the station, accompanied by a few professionals if available. The remaining group would explore the surrounding area, particularly the large warehouses known to be nearby. Everyone nodded in agreement. Jack, preparing himself, inquired about the team assignments. The leader responded that Todoroki, Tokoyami, Kirishima, Sato, Shiro, and Shoji would accompany him. Bakugo and Iida would lead the rest of the group, while Class 2B would operate independently. The leader checked if everyone was ready as they donned their costumes. Shiro affirmed their readiness, and the others followed suit with nods of agreement. Satisfied, the leader noted the arrival of the girls from their class and Class 2B. After confirming that everyone was prepared, he signaled for them to move out, promising to explain the plan as they proceeded. Divisions are pulling some apart. Hope keeps them together. 2 hours later, Shiro asks how many warehouses there are. The response is that there are many, more than they can count. Kamakiri sighs, clearly unimpressed with the answer. As they approach another warehouse, They notice it is locked with a rusty padlock, its label faded, revealing only the number. Zero wonders if this is number 15, and the reply confirms it. With a surge of power, the protagonist charges one for all to 5% and brings his heel down on the padlock, shattering it in one strike. The padlock falls to the concrete, and he opens the door just enough to step inside. It is almost entirely dark, but he can make out something on the ceiling, perhaps a light. Zero looks around for a light switch, and Kamakiri finds one, activating weak fluorescent lights that flicker on, illuminating the space. As the lights brighten, a shocking sight is revealed. The protagonist stares in disbelief as Zero jiges and nearly loses his lunch. Kamakiri struggles to maintain his composure. The sight before them is disturbing: a body hanging from the ceiling by a hook through its shoulder, completely devoid of skin except for its face. The battered and bloodied face belongs to Juroda Shishida, suspended about 7 feet off the ground. The scene is grotesque, with visible tendons and bone, and a pool of blood beneath the body. Kamakiri's anger erupts as he punches the metal door, causing it to rattle. He demands to know if the AML is responsible for this. Zero's question hangs in the air, and Kamakiri's response is filled with frustration, confirming that it was indeed the AML. The protagonist presses a communicator to contact Aizawa, who answers quickly. After confirming Shishida's death, Aizawa falls silent, asking for the location. The protagonist provides the details and emphasizes the need for assistance. Aizawa agrees to alert the police, and the protagonist resolves to bring Shishida down. They approach the body and examine the steel chain. Kamakiri asks if they should cut it, and the protagonist instructs Zero to take Kamakiri up so he can catch the body. Zero nods, and with a burst of tape, he pulls himself and Kamakiri up to where the chain can be cut. The protagonist catches the body gently and sets it down away from the main chain, staring at Shishida's face, which, despite the gruesome circumstances, bears a faint smile. As he closes Shishida's eyes, he mutters a phrase of farewell, looking down at his now blood-stained shirt. Overwhelmed, he sits down about 30 feet from the body, rubbing his eyes as tears begin to form. Shiozaki approaches, recognizing him and expressing concern over the blood covering him. He struggles to respond, unable to find the words. When she asks if he found Juroda, his silence speaks volumes. Shiozaki insists on getting through, but he blocks her path, unable to let her see. Despite his protests, she ducks under his arms and kneels beside the bloodied body, screaming and crying as she touches Juroda's face. Kendo and Tsu pale at the sight, while Kamakiri watches in shock and sadness, and Zero is visibly upset. The protagonist, too, finds tears streaming down his face. Shiozaki pleads for Juroda to wake up, her cries echoing in the silence. Unable to bear the moment, the protagonist steps outside, finding a nearby warehouse wall. Charging his arm to 20%, he slams it against the corrugated metal, partially destroying the wall. He backs away and sits down on the concrete, allowing himself to cry, feeling the weight of the loss, even though he didn't know Juroda well. Primus sanguis. First blood. It should never have to be a child. Chapter end. The gathering was somber as All Might stood at the podium, addressing the crowd. He spoke to remember the life and mourn the death of Juroda Shishida, who had been taken from them far too soon. He described Juroda as an intelligent, strong, and profound young man, never rude, always calm, yet capable of unleashing a storm when the moment called for it. All Might expressed his gratitude for having known Juroda over the past year and a half, acknowledging that he was on the path to becoming a powerful hero. With a heavy heart, he lamented that he wished he could have saved him, feeling a deep sense of regret for not being able to do more. He invited anyone else who wished to speak to come forward. The entire UA community was present, with staff members dressed in black suits. Among the attendees were many professional heroes, including Endeavor, Hawks, and Gang Orca. Roomie sat a couple of rows back, staring straight ahead, lost in her thoughts. As the ceremony continued, members of Class 2B took turns sharing their memories of Juroda, recounting stories that brought both laughter and tears. Shiozaki, clearly exhausted, broke down during her speech and had to be helped off the stage by Kendo and Kodai. Kamakiri struggled to maintain his composure, as did Vlad King. Iida spoke next, praising Jiroda as an excellent student. Following the students, Jiroda's family took the stage. His father, younger brother, and mother delivered heartfelt speeches, sharing poignant memories of him at home. They revealed that he had a playful side, surprising many with tales of his pranks, but they emphasized his kind and sweet nature. As the family concluded their tributes, Izuku Midoriya stood up, adjusting his suit jacket as he approached the podium. He pulled out a piece of paper with a prepared speech but quickly realized that the words did not reflect his true feelings. He decided to speak from the heart instead. He introduced himself as a member of Class 2A and expressed his anger. He was not merely upset about Jiroda's untimely death, he was furious that it had been caused by a group of mentally deranged individuals who believed they had the right to decide who deserved to live. He named the organization responsible the Anti-Mutant League and let the name linger in the air. He explained that this group held a deep-seated hatred for those with mutant quirks, including himself and his classmates, one of whom had nearly lost their life at the hands of an operative from this organization. He recounted how he had managed to restrain her, but she had chosen to end her own life rather than face capture. The room fell silent as he spoke. Midoriya declared that the Anti-Mutant League was responsible for Jiroda's death, and he expressed his conviction that there was no doubt in his mind. He revealed the state in which he and his classmates had found Jiroda, suggesting that it was far from painless. He admitted to feeling a primal urge for vengeance, wanting to hold those accountable for Jiroda's death to justice. He proclaimed his intent to declare war on the Anti-Mutant League, stating that he would pursue them relentlessly, whether alone or with others. However, he emphasized that he would not take action without the family's permission. Turning to Jiroda's family, he expressed his desire to seek justice for their son, acknowledging that he might not be able to find everyone involved or bring them all to justice. He asked for their blessing, his voice cracking with emotion as he conveyed his sorrow for not being able to save Jiroda. He shared his observations about Jiroda, highlighting his intelligence, strength, and kindness, which had earned him the respect of his classmates. Midoriya vowed that Jiroda's name would never be forgotten as long as he lived, and he pleaded with the family to allow him to seek justice for their son. After a moment of silence, Jiroda's mother nodded in agreement, and Midoriya returned the gesture with gratitude. He promised to do his best, whatever that might entail, and then took his seat next to Bakugo, who placed a comforting hand on his shoulder as he fought back tears. 6 hours later, Jack and his cousins stood before Midoriya, each carrying suitcases and bags. Jack sighed, expressing his wish to stay longer, but the reality of their parents' wishes weighed heavily on him. Midoriya acknowledged this with a nod, encouraging Jack to keep safe. Jack pulled him into a hug, followed by Julia, Kedra, and Kirsten, who all embraced him before heading to a waiting taxi. As the taxi drove away, Midoriya made his way back to the dorms and into the living room. Bakugo noticed the absence of the Yankees and asked if they had left. Midoriya confirmed that their parents wanted them to go, which he understood. He surveyed the remaining members of classes 2A and 2B, noticing Shiozaki's red eyes, a reflection of the emotions shared by many in the room. After a moment of silence, Midoriya took a deep breath, feeling compelled to speak. He looked at Shiozaki, who lifted her head to meet his gaze. He addressed the group, reminding them of his earlier speech and expressing the need for help against the AML. Kamikiri immediately voiced his support, fueled by anger at the loss of Shishida. Siro joined in, and soon everyone was affirming their commitment, except for Shiozaki, who remained deep in thought. Midoriya chose not to pressure her, allowing her the space to consider his request. Eventually, she spoke up, her voice calm as she asked about his plans for those responsible for Jiroda's death. Midoriya explained that if they continued to threaten them, he would take decisive action. However, if they surrendered, he would ensure they faced justice. Shiozaki resolved to help him, wanting Shishida to find peace. Roomie entered confidently, declaring her support as well, joined by Gang Orca, Hawks, Endeavor, and their teachers. Gang Orca echoed Roomie's sentiment, albeit with a more restrained tone. Hawks complimented Midoriya's speech, prompting Bakugo to laugh and tease him about his admiration for the pro-hero. Aizawa inquired about their plan, and Midoriya explained the need to dismantle the AML, akin to their previous encounters with the PLF. He suggested searching for cells within Tokyo, emphasizing the importance of careful investigation. Roomie expressed her disdain for the tediousness of the task, prompting Aizawa to comment on her relationship with Midoriya, which caught everyone off guard. Hawks, surprised by the revelation, questioned Aizawa's words, while Midoriya felt his face heat up. Kamakiri expressed admiration for Midoriya's situation, calling him a literal god for dating someone like Roomie. Midoriya, flustered, urged the group to move on, but Ishido interjected, teasingly hinting at something more. Shiozaki, maintaining her composure, stated that as long as there were no inappropriate relations, she was indifferent. Ishido, however, continued to provoke Midoriya, leading to an awkward moment. Just then, Hawks recalled Mirko's earlier comments about feeling unwell, causing Midoriya's heart to race with realization. Kaminari, breaking the tension, blurted out the implication that Mirko might be pregnant. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to her, who did not deny it. Midoriya quickly defended himself, claiming it wasn't entirely his fault, which ignited a mix of laughter, anger, and playful threats from his classmates. Choosing to flee, Midoriya dashed away as half the class began to chase him, eager for a bit of fun amidst the chaos. It seems that the text you provided is incomplete. Please provide a more detailed excerpt or the full text you would like me to revise, and I will be happy to assist you.